Boy, I tell you, a lot of people wanted to text in about Bally Sports. Woof. Unbelievable. One texter said, if the Titans came out and said we're going to be mediocre this year, you would not come on the radio and say they did exactly what they should, and I'm proud of them for giving us the expectations. You would still say that they suck. Well, that comes from David. Barry Trotz came on the show last year and said, fans, be patient. Be patient. What did Barry Trotz say after this year? When they made the playoffs, they were surprised. They got hot. They made the playoffs. And he said, we're going to get younger, and we might end up taking a step back. If the Titans came out and said, the key to this season is the young quarterback, and it's going to take time. We've got to be patient, and everything we're doing is to try to figure out and to develop our young quarterback to make sure that we can put him in the best situation to become one of the 5 or 6 good quarterbacks in this sport. I'd say that's the exact right approach. Don't tell me what I would say, because I've been banging this drum all offseason that, guys, it's going to take time. Guys, we got to figure out what Levis can do. But they also, when people say we got to figure out what Levis is, it makes me uncomfortable because it's their job to make Levis better. It's not just let's see if Levis is any good. No, let's see if you guys can mold the clay into something special with the raw ability that he's got. You know, it's a two-way street here. It's not just Levis. It's the Titans supporting the growth of Levis. And if they told me that's what this season was about, and they said it straight up like that, I'd say that is the right approach to this year. But don't tell me what I would say if they said something. I will tell you what I will think if they say it. 615-737-1025. We got a lot more phones to get to. Chris Sanders, of course, joins us on the program every week. We will get to that. And Jeffrey Simmons said something. Sometimes I get criticized for always thinking that I have all the answers. But there's something today I just don't know. I just don't know. I'm not sure I like it. And I want Chris's opinion on it, so we'll do that next. Let's talk about Window Nation. Window Nation is an honest company. It's a company that I trust, and I'll tell you why I trust them. Because not too long ago, I had Window Nation out to my home, and I said, I want you guys to look at my windows. I want you guys to give me the assessment. What windows need replacing? What windows can I take out to get the energy-efficient models in here to save money and lower my energy costs? And after they showed me all of their wonderful products, they said, you don't need to replace your windows. I said, really? They said, yeah. I said, that's the sign of an honest company. That's why I love telling you about them. And I love telling you about their Window Nation semi-annual sale. Now through June 30th, get 50% off all windows along with no interest for 5 years and a bonus 10% savings when you schedule an estimate at 866-90Nation or windownation.com. Again, this is through June 30th. 50% off all windows, no interest for 5 years, a bonus 10% savings when you schedule 866-90Nation, windownation.com. Stillman and Company on the program. So I saw this has kind of been trending around Twitter. Jeffrey Simmons, I guess, is in Los Angeles. And Jeffrey Simmons went on the Rich Eisen show. Ian, do we have the cut? Okay. So Jeffrey Simmons was asked about week 1 against the Chicago Bears.
Well, he was kind of asked about talking trash.
He was. And so he was talking about how he talks trash to everybody. He said the one thing that he doesn't do, he said he doesn't do family, that he won't rip on somebody for their family, but the way Simmons put it was, once we get in between those lines, like, I got to feed my family, I'm going to say whatever I want to say. And so he was asked about Caleb Williams week 1, and here's what Simmons said on the Rich Eisen show.
I don't know, man.
So you do research a little bit.
I just, whatever come to mind, that's what I say.
But you're not trying to make them laugh, right?
No. I'm trying to defeat you.
Right.
So when I say something to you, I want you to be like,
you want to hurt.
Yeah, I want it. Yeah.
See, this is another reason why I wanted to have you here. Because you, Jeffrey Simmons, week 1 of the National Football League season, will be the first human being on the other side of the line of scrimmage.
Painted nails.
In a game.
Painted nails.
I can't wait to say that to him.
For Caleb Williams.
Most definitely.
So, you've got that planned?
Oh, it's gonna be one of them games, especially. I mean, he probably get smack talk to his his teammates right now, but like it's gonna be, especially a game like that. My first game, like, of course, I missed the last end of the season.
Right.
It's gonna be the first game of the season. They got us coming to Chicago. All the hype gonna be around them, of course. So it's like.
He said painted nails. He's going to get on Caleb Williams' back. I don't know if that's a good thing to say publicly. I don't know if it's a good thing to unload the barrel before the game. And I also don't know if it's something that now Caleb Williams, that's a little motivation and, do that. Everybody trash talks, but do that during the game. Don't do that in the media. Don't be that. I don't know how to feel. Chris Sanders joins us now on the program, former Titans receiver.
No!
Your thoughts?
No, my God, don't do it. No way. And the reason why I said it, because you remember we did an interview, I think maybe about a month and a half ago, and you said what was the toughest game. And I said the first game is going to be Chicago. And the reason why it's going to be tough, Jared, is because they got all the hoopla. They got the number 1 pick in the draft. They got new coach. They got all these things, and they want to win this first game to get their crowd into it. So now you got a situation to where you got Jeffrey Simmons talking about his nails and talking about this. You don't think that that's going to be some extra ammo to go out to beat the Tennessee Titans? So I just think that, you can trash talk, but you want to trash talk not a month and a half or 2 months before the game. You want to trash talk before the game so he doesn't have no ammo.
I'm torn on this for a couple of reasons.
Yeah,
I agree with you completely on what you just said. But at the same time, if he goes on this show and he just sits there and Rich Eisen says, you apparently are a big trash talker. And he says, I trash talk. I got to feed my whatever. They say, Caleb Williams, what do you have? And he says, I'm
going to have about 4 sacks. Nobody can block me. I'm in your face. All that crazy stuff. But when you start talking about a guy painting his nails, now you took it from, okay, I'm talking trash in the football. Now it becomes personal. Now, even though, he's cracking jokes and he's making fun, and yes, it's kind of jokey joke. But at the end of the day, if I'm Caleb Williams and I'm listening to that, understand the football stuff. When you're talking about somebody painting their nails, that's a whole different ballgame. That's motivation to say, well, hold up. Don't talk. You're not just talking about football. Now you're talking about my person. And when you're talking about my person, then that's when I kind of get offended. I'm going to go out there, not just show you, but I'm going to show the Tennessee Titans that I can go out there and do the job.
Chris, Will Levis is out in Cabo right now. He's got Chigakonkwo, Josh Wiley, Tajay Spears, Calvin Ridley, and DeAndre Hopkins with him. And when it came out that Levis was going to take those guys out to Cabo, I said that's a good thing. Now, there are 2 things here. First, it sounds like Levis is taking the receivers out there. Levis's contract is for $9 million for all 4 years that he's under contract.
Oh, yeah.
I think that Calvin Ridley and DeAndre Hopkins should be the ones footing the bills as the veteran receivers that make the kind of money that those guys make as compared to the young $9 million total quarterback. I just think it's a leadership thing, Chris. I know Levis wants to show, hey, I can be the guy.
Yeah.
I'm going to act like Matthew Stafford. But he doesn't have Matthew Stafford money. I think from a leadership standpoint, Hopkins and Ridley should be footing the bill. What do you think of that?
I don't think it's a money issue when you're talking about leadership. It's about making others better, and I think he wants to make others better. I understand that the money situation, Hop got a lot of change. Calvin really got a lot of change. Boyd got some change. But at the end of the day, it's about making your guys better. I'll give you a perfect example. When Will Levis first came in, and he was roommates with NWI, and NWI was like, man, what do you do? And what's his name? I just studied the playbook. So
that's Colton Dow, but I know what you mean.
Yeah, kind of like in that sense. But, he's basically saying that, I'm here to get a job done. I'm here to make plays. I'm here to take our team to a Super Bowl. And I think with him, doing that and getting those guys throwing balls in combo and catching passes and, doing walkthrough, I just think that it shows his leadership of wanting to be a leader but also keeping other guys accountable, that even though we have these 6 weeks off, I still expect you guys to get the job done, and working out is the best part of doing that.
I agree. It's great. But again, I'm talking about the actual financing of this. I believe the guys that make the money should be the ones that are, stepping up and saying, hey, we got it covered. Don't worry about it, young guy. We are here to help rise you up. We appreciate what you're doing, but I just think the guys that make the most money should be the ones footing the bill here. I don't know who is. It sounds like it's Levis, though, who's footing the bill, because that's what the star quarterbacks do, but he's not making star quarterback money.
Yeah, but the thing about it is you got to sacrifice. I mean, he's not making that star quarterback money, but he's making a sacrifice. I know how.
If you were making $24 million a year, you were making $50 million, because you got a family, I know. If you were making $50 million and he was making $9 million, and he said, Chris, I want to pay for you to go out to the Bahamas with me or wherever, would you say, hold on, young fella, I got this? Or would you ride on his dime?
Knowing me being cheap, I might ride on his dime.
Stop.
Hey, if people who know me, I'm cheap. I mean, I'll give my last leg to anybody, but when it comes to, for me, I'm cheap. But I understand what you're saying. I mean, I know those cats got a lot of money, and maybe they probably did that. Maybe they sat around and said, okay, Will Levis, let us take care of the bill. And maybe Will Levis like, what, I understand you guys are making a lot of money and a lot of change, and, you got millions, but let me show you how much I care about you. Let me show you how much I care
about this is that it's only 5 guys that are out there. And I understand some guys may have other conflicts, right? Like Tyler Boyd may be moving to Nashville. Burks is not out there. No, he's not.
Okay.
So other guys may have, I think Nick Westbrook-Akine said that at minicamp he just had a child. Maybe that hurt feelings of some guys that weren't invited out there.
Yeah, you could, but I don't think it was that, because you got Burks, I guess, just got married and going on the honeymoon. I can understand it. Then you got NWI, who just had a baby. I don't know the situation with Kyle Phillips and all the other guys. I don't know if they were there or not. But if he did, I'm just throwing this out. If he did just pick 5 guys, then yes, as a receiver, I'm going to be hurt. Just like if Steve Mack, rest his soul, picked Kevin Dyson, Yancey Thigpen, all the other guys, but didn't pick me. Yes, my feelings will be hurt, because basically he's saying, I'm not depending on you. So I'm not saying this happened, but I just believe the guys that are missing, I think they got married or had babies. So, I wouldn't even look into that even as much.
Chris Sanders, last one for you on the program.
Yes, sir.
Which is, as the dead period continues up into camp, how would you feel if you were coaching this team, now that all the offseason stuff's over? How would you feel about this team going into training camp?
You know what, Jared, that's a great question. In my opinion, I would feel really, really good. And the reason why I feel really good, because I went to practice, a month ago, and they had their first OTAs, and there's just a different feel. There's kind of like a different attitude, and there's just like a new boost of energy. And just watching the defense, I love what the defense. I know Jeffrey Simmons wasn't participating, and some guys wasn't participating, but the attitude that I see in the secondary with Awuzie and Snead, I know Snead hasn't been there as much, and you got the secondary that's playing well. The reason why I'm excited is because there's just a new set of energy. I mean, I'm not saying that, Mike Vrabel didn't have the energy and all that stuff. I'm just saying it's something different about this team. Everybody is on board. You got leaders like Arden Key that's speaking up even more. I know he talks loud, but he said that I get to be myself now. So when you have guys that are coming out their shell that are playing because they want to as opposed to fear, I think you got something special.
Chris Sanders, as always, joining us on the program. Of course, you can follow Chris on Instagram, and every day you will see how much Chris loves his wife, because he posts about it every day. So, Chris, I know
love
you're
her.
very happily married.
Yes,
You
I
and
am,
Faith
thank God,
Sanders
yes.
are just have the summer that I'm jealous of. By the way,
No,
you posted
yes.
that you were taking her on a surprise vacation trip. Where'd you take her?
I did. I can't tell you, man. It's a surprise place, man. I'll have to bite your kneecap if I told you. I can't do it. You one day you got to come with me, man. It was just real cool, just for us to get away and nurture our relationship, man.
All right, we'll take your phones. And where did Chris go? I'm kidding. Chris Sanders, as always. Chris, take good care of yourself, bud.
Hey, love you, brother. Bye-bye.
Yep, Chris Sanders on our program, as always. Where do you think he went, Ian?
He's still there. He's on vacation somewhere. I don't think he's left.
Chris did the interview while he was on vacation?
I called him, and he's like, man, I'm still on vacation. We've had an off week, and I don't even know what day it is. And so I just called him to make sure he was okay, because he usually calls in, before, and he hadn't called. And so I reached out, and he's like, oh, I'm ready. I was like, everyone needs a vacation. He's like, nope, I'm ready to go.
I told Ian, I haven't talked to Chris this week. I don't know if he's on vacation or not. And I was like, hey, if Chris doesn't want to do it, or if Chris doesn't answer, that's fine. I get he's on vacation. I did not know he was still on vacation. That's dedication from one Christopher Dwayne Sanders, the NFL record holder for the least amount of rushing yards in the history of the NFL. This Friday and Saturday, 93.3 Classic Hits will be carrying live coverage of the Rackley Roofing 200 and the Tennessee Lottery 250 races at the Nashville Super Speedway. Coverage presented by Green Trees will begin Friday at 6:30 p.m. and on Saturday at 3:30. Green Trees Company is a family-owned cannabis company located in Hendersonville and a new location in West Nashville and available online at greentreescompany.com. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game, streaming live on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook live from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios. So we had Tony Khan on yesterday. He owns the Jags. His dad owns the Jags, but he is, I don't know exactly what this title is. It's like owner/chief development strategist, something or another, whatever. He's in the mix over there in Jacksonville, and he was on our show yesterday because he also owns AEW, and he was promoting the Blood and Guts at Bridgestone Arena next month. And I asked him about Calvin Ridley, and he said about Calvin Ridley, hey, we loved Calvin Ridley, but we had to make a decision, and we're really happy with the fact that we were able to acquire Brian Thomas Jr., who they drafted out of LSU in the first round, and they're paying him on a rookie contract, and they were able to trade back, and they were able to get more picks in order to do it. And I said, look, I get what Jacksonville's doing. I get what the Jags were doing. They said, hey, Ridley's going to cost $24 million a season, $23 million a season, whatever it ended up being. And so instead of the $23 million a season, let's pay Calvin Ridley $23 million for the entire duration of that contract. Let's do that. And so I get it. Makes sense. And I think it's the right move. And the Titans, I get the move the Titans made. You can kill the intro music, by the way. But the Titans, I get what the Titans are doing. I understand. The offensive line was so bad, and the tackle class was not good, so the Titans had to draft on the offensive line. Now, I don't think the Titans had to draft the question mark at 38, but the Titans had to draft on the offensive line, and so the Titans did draft on the offensive line, so they signed Ridley after Danico Autry left so that they could get a receiver for the quarterback that can run. Makes sense to me. And somebody texted me, and they said, I love how you take the word at face value of everybody outside of the Titans, but never take the word at face value of the people inside the Titans. The Jags made the same offer to the Titans, supposedly, and they clearly wanted Ridley back. And they ended up picking a wide receiver in the draft because they had to replace him because Ridley decided to come here. And I started thinking about it. Again, I believe in being fair. I know a lot of you think that that's not true. But I do believe in being fair. Now, Albert Breer reported, and I don't know. I thought it was $19 million is what Jacksonville offered. Supposedly, it might have been $20 million. I thought it was 19. The Jacksonville offered $19 million a season. The Titans ended up paying Ridley $23. To me, that's simple math, right? $5 million extra per season for 4 years is $20 million. That's not a hard decision to make. They're offering me $20 million extra. Okay, I'll take that. I believe that if Jacksonville, and maybe I'm wrong about this, I believe if Jacksonville had offered $23 million a year for Calvin Ridley would still be a Jacksonville Jaguar. And if Jacksonville wanted Calvin Ridley that bad, they would have signed him to a contract when they had his rights before free agency opened, and they would have switched the third-round pick that they gave to the Falcons, which would have become a second-round pick, which is why they didn't extend Ridley before free agency opened. They had to wait until the start of the new league year to sign Ridley to a deal. That's what I believe. But Ian, it is a fair question. Am I wrong for believing Tony Khan what he tells us, but not necessarily believing the Titans?
Well, I mean, both people are trying to, CYA a little bit.
Here's why I don't believe the Titans. Because what Tony Khan said is believable. We liked Calvin Ridley. We loved him in the building. He's a great player. But we had to make a decision. We love Brian Thomas Jr., who we drafted. That makes sense. Saying, hey, there's a walk-away price. We've got to, we're going to offer you $19 or $20 million a year. We're not going to offer you $30 million a year. It's like the executive in The Athletic told Mike Sando after free agency, quote, there is a walk-away point on some of these deals, and paying high-dollar numbers to a 29-year-old receiver now on his third team in 3 years amounts to bad business. Jacksonville had a walk-away number, and they knew it because, hey, we'll just go get somebody in the draft. I believe that. Here's what I don't believe. Ran on Bussin' with the Boys, Ian, if we have it, when asked about Calvin Ridley, was talking about why Calvin Ridley chose to sign with the Titans.
I'll be perfectly honest with you. Everything was comparable, you know, and he had the option to go back. Whether the number was, I'm good. Appreciate the offer though, being hospitable,
I got you.
Southern hospitality. He had the option to go wherever he wanted to go, but I think it's more of a positive in that we made him comfortable, you know, coming here. And then the lesser known of the deal was, again, here, Nashville, Tennessee. His wife's family's from Huntsville.
I didn't know that.
Right down the road. You know, makes it an easy transition for her to still be now you're closer to your family, you know, and so it, again, competitive advantage being here in Nashville.
I just don't believe that. Like, I believe that it was the $20 million extra. Again, the way I read it was Breer said $19 million. Let's say he said $20 million, and the Titans offered $23 million. So that's $3 million a season for. That's $12 million extra dollars. I don't believe, we made him feel comfortable. His wife's from Huntsville. I mean, I'm sure those are good things, but it's not like, this is exactly perfect, and this is why I just felt the Titans were so much better than me. If he had taken $18 million to come to the Titans when they were offering him $19 million, then I might believe you. But I have a hard time believing that. But I do think it is fair that I am way more skeptical of the Titans than I am of other people when they say things. And maybe I should be more skeptical of Tony Khan when it comes to what he said about the Jags. I mean, I was a little skeptical about just how great Trevor Lawrence was yesterday. I think the reason they signed Trevor Lawrence to the contract was because that was the way to get it done before they went to the Metro Council and asked them for all the money for the stadium that they just got yesterday, $1.4 billion. But that cut and say, yes, that's why he picked the Titans, because his wife is from Huntsville, not because they offered him a crap load of money. One texter into the text line, our phone line is driven by WilsonCountyHunter.com. Jared, you don't know who's footing the bill for Will Levis's Cabo trip, so why are we even talking about this? I think he said, I'm taking him out to Cabo. I think I'm taking him out to Cabo. Another texter says, when have the Titans given us a thought that we could take them at their word? See, that's the other thing. Rand said a lot of things over the last year and a half that he's been the general manager that just don't seem to add up. Right? Like Mike Vrabel, my daughter has a picture of Mike Vrabel on her cell phone as her background, and that's why my family was so mad that we fired Mike Vrabel. Kind of like, what? What? Or all the GMs that texted him after the Skoronski pick and the Dowell pick and the Sweat pick. It's like every time he gets in front of a microphone, he says something that's like, wait a minute. When he told Will Compton that they had an inkling that Michael Penix was going to go at 8 to the Falcons, did anybody in America have an inkling that Michael Penix was going at 8? By the way, after the Falcons made that pick, I listened to NFL radio on Sirius. Rick Spielman was ripping them. Mark Dominic was ripping them. And I know those guys aren't still general managers in the league, but those guys are smart dudes, and they're just ripping them left and right. And then, Sando talks to all those executives in the NFL, and they're ripping the Falcons. But Rand knew they were going to take them? Hard for me to believe some of that. And then again, it's the Titans. They told Diana Rossini, Vrabel's not going anywhere. And then what'd they do? Fired Vrabel. Jason in Dover says, why don't you be fair and tell Tony Khan it was stupid to pay Trevor Lawrence, or brought up the fumble that was a forward pass that gave the Jags a playoff berth? Well, we talked about that game last year at the Super Bowl. On the Lawrence front, I told him. I said, people are trying to wonder, you guys spent all that money. My theory is they think he's Joe Burrow. And then he basically said that was the case. Josh says, I mean, the Titans have been so truthful and transparent over the years, I don't know why you wouldn't trust them. That's Josh from White House. Jason says, you can't trust any of these guys. You should always be skeptical. I think I do a pretty good job of being skeptical. Okay, there is one thing that I am having, like I believe. And if I'm wrong about this, then I will say that they got me. I will say that. And it does transition to what I want to talk to, so we'll do that next. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Stillman and Company, by the way, Be sure to join the Nashville Predators for the 2024 NHL Draft Watch Party at Draft Picks Restaurant and Bar inside of the Ford Ice Center Bellevue this Friday starting at 6 o'clock. Celebrate the newest members of Smashville while enjoying food and drink specials, door prizes, games hosted by Wayne D., and live broadcasts from Max Hers. More details at NashvillePredators.com/draft. So, Ian, Keith in Bowling Green says that he is skeptical of my skepticism.
Okay.
When again, the one texter says I need to be skeptical of everybody. Somebody else says I'm not skeptical of other people, but I'm too skeptical of the Titans. And then Keith says he's skeptical of my skepticism. Well, let me just say this. I was right about the Mike Vrabel thing. I was the one guy. Paul Kaharski can bitch about me all he wants. He was carrying Vrabel's dishes, and he thought Vrabel was coming back. I was the one that's like, this is fakakta. This is not right. This is screwed up. And remember, TD went over there, and he sat down with Vrabel and Rand Carthon. And TD said, unless these guys are lying to my face, that everything is hunky-dory. And I'm not saying that TD was wrong, because a reporter's job is to report, and that's what he was being told. But it didn't add up. And I got yelled at by Teresa Walker in the press room about, Vrabel not getting fired and all. But I was right. And that was because I was skeptical. Speaking of skepticism, maybe I will look like a dope. Maybe I will feel like a dope. But I actually believe Barry Trotz. Barry Trotz came on our show the other day, and I asked him about the Saros deal. Now, he sat down with the media after the season was over, and he told the media he'd like to get a deal done with Saros, and Saros like to get a deal done here. Then I talked to him after they traded Ryan McDonough, and he said, hey, I'd like to do a deal, but, he's going to do what's in the best interest of the Predators. And I felt like that was a little bit of a walk back. And then all the Elliots of the world and everybody else say, well, it looks like Nashville's going to keep UC Saros. And I'm like, but are they? The little bit of skepticism. Barry was on our show again this week, and I asked him once again about Saros, and I think Barry made it pretty clear. Clear's the right word. I'm not saying he said he's going to sign Saros. He didn't say that. But I think he implied it. As far as your own guy, UC Saros, we've probably talked about the Saros deal a couple times now. Are there lines in the sand when you guys approach Saros' camp, whether it's trade protection or length or whatever it may be, that you guys just, as much as you want to get a Saros deal done, you're not necessarily willing to cross? Or is this we're going to find a way to get this deal done kind of situation?
I think it's one of those, Juice knows what I think of him. I know his agent knows what I think of him. I've had very good dealings with his agent to this point, so I don't think there's necessarily need to be a point where you're going to draw a line in the sand. I think we're going to try to find a nice common ground where it's a win-win for both. And to this point, I see no reason to draw a line in the sand, and I'm sure they don't as well.
Okay. I have now talked to Barry Trotz multiple times. You've heard those conversations. I have now talked to him multiple times since the end of the season, and I am convinced that they're going to re-sign UC Saros. And I don't think they're going to re-sign him on July 1, but it wouldn't surprise me if they sign him on July 2. I think they're going to re-sign UC Saros. And maybe, again, we talk about skepticism, and the one guy said in the text line, be skeptical of everybody. Because in these sports, football, hockey, basketball, baseball, college baseball, the a-hole coach over at A&M, you see that? He got up there and called that reporter selfish for asking him if he was going to leave to take the Texas job. And then what did that guy go do? He took the Texas job. They all lie at times. And trust me, it wouldn't surprise me. Like TD said, hey, if these guys are lying to my face, it would not surprise me if Barry Trotz was lying to my face last year at the trade deadline when he said, if I don't get a deal done with Tommy Novak, I'm going to trade him. That could have been a total bluff. And I would not have felt bad, or I would not have thought it wrong of Barry to say that to me and then do the opposite. I would not have sat there and said, oh, Barry Trotz is dishonest. To me, that's business. Dishonest is lying about something after the fact. This, that's poker. That's business. That's the game. Maybe Barry's not telling the truth. I don't know. But I am convinced that they're not trading Saros. So when I see, Dave Pagnotta, who I do not think has good sourcing. Elliott has good sourcing. Pierre LeBron has good sourcing. Chris Johnston has good sourcing. Darren Drager, though, Ian, I don't know if you've noticed this. Darren Drager hasn't really been.
No, not as much breaking news lately.
But he's got good sources. Frank Saravalli, Daily Faceoff, he's got good sources. Those guys break the real news. Pagnotta doesn't break anything. But he, says he has rumors. He gossips, and so they put him on TV and radio, and I'm not against it because we like the gossip. But I see Pagnotta putting out there, well, if the Predators, sources say they might trade Saros, I don't think so. I do not think so. I think it is a done deal. I think they are going to sign him to an extension. Now, the Askarov thing that comes with that, Barry said on the show that they brought Mitch Korn back in, the old goaltending coach when Pekka was here, that they brought him in to be the organization's goaltending coach. Now, the guy who's still doing it, he's going to stay with the team, but Mitch Korn's going to oversee the whole thing. Barry said they did that for Askarov. I really don't believe in Willie Donick's utopia that the Predators sign Saros to a long-term extension, and then they sit Askarov as the backup for 3 years, and then they turn it over to Askarov. I don't believe that that's a realistic possibility. But I'm just looking at the one thing, which is the Saros point, before we even get to Askarov. I'm going to take Barry at his word. I think he's telling the truth. I think they're going to sign him. And I may not agree with it. You may not agree with it. I don't know. But I do think that this is what's going to happen. And while I am naturally skeptical, I'm really not skeptical of that. 615-737-1025 is our phone number, 615-737-1025. Okay, let's operate under that assumption that the Predators do re-sign UC Saros. Then how do they get some of these big players? We'll get to that next. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. There are some big names that are on the trade market. There are some rumors that you guys are in some of those big names. Would you say that there's some accuracy to that?
Yeah, I think so. I think, and it's some of it is by default. A lot of the top players in the league sort of look for destinations where they feel that they can check a few boxes. One, are they a good organization? Two, are they in a good city? Three, are they have the ability to win, be it through the players or through draft capital and all those type of things. So we check a lot of the boxes. And do they have the number one thing is, do they have any salary cap flexibility? So I think we've checked a lot of those boxes. So we'll be rumored for a lot of things. I mean, earlier, as you know, we were rumored for I think it was a prominent player in Toronto, and that was just people trying to connect dots. But those type of things are going to be out there.
That was Barry Trotz on the program earlier this week saying they are in the mix for the big names. You know what's funny about Barry? And I love that man, but he'll talk, what would you say, Ian, a minute 45 for each answer, 2 minutes, 3 minutes for an answer on Barry Trotz?
It depends, anywhere from a minute to 3 minutes.
Probably about right. Barry will talk and talk and talk. But with a lot of these questions, I mean, I really only just need like the first 3 words. Play that cut again. Listen to my question. Again, I'm asking, are you in on the big names? And listen to what Barry says. There are some big names that are on the trade market. There are some rumors that you guys are in some of those big names. Would you say that there's some accuracy to that?
Yeah, I think so. I think, and it's some of it is by default.
Okay.
A lot of
That's it. Just right there. Yeah, I think so. That's accurate. Okay. So they're in on some of the big names. Now, he says some of that is by default. I think he's talking about the rumors, saying that the rumors are by default because people are adding up 2 and 2, and they're saying, okay, Nashville needs more firepower, and they need younger guys, and a Martin Necas is a younger guy at Carolina, so that could be a move that they – but when he says there's some accuracy to it, that means they're in on some of the big names. Now, as we learned with the Shea Weber, Hall of Famer Shea Weber, I guess, now when we go back to the Shea Weber PK Subban deal, some of these trades happen and you don't even see them coming. Where it happens and it's like, guffaw. Like, what just happened? So, Barry says they're in on the big names. Right now, Necas and Marner are probably the 2 big names everybody knows. Zegras in Anaheim is another name Adam Vingan threw out yesterday, which I do think has some merit. I think Barry would hate Trevor Zegras of what I know about Trevor Zegras. And then I'm sure there are some other guys that are out there. The Canadian press is basically saying, maybe Leon Draisaitl stays, maybe Leon Draisaitl wants to go. That's a different discussion. But I'm not exactly sure how the Predators make a trade for one of those guys, a Marner, a Necas, even a Zegras. I don't know how they make that kind of trade. Maybe Zegras they could. But Carolina's trying to win the cup. So they're not going to want a bunch of second-round picks in exchange for Martin Necas. They're going to want people that are ready in the NHL right now. If Saros is part of the discussion, then it makes sense. And we use Toronto as an example here, right? Toronto just re-signed or is going to re-sign Joseph Woll, who was their backup goalie last year, but he's not a true bona fide ace like Saros is, and they've got all the firepower in the world, and Toronto said that they're willing to break up the core 4, and so I could see a deal worked around Saros and Marner. But if you don't include UC Saros in a trade, I'm not sure that there's really a package you could put together that Toronto would want. If you don't include UC Saros in a trade, I'm not exactly sure. What could you give the Carolina Hurricanes that they would say, okay, that is worthy of a Martin Necas? And again, Necas is one of those players who I really like, who's young, who's going to get a new deal, who there are no red flags on, but he's not a superstar either. And so it's hard for me to say, okay, just sell the farm for this guy in the hopes that at 25 years old, he becomes this great superstar. Last year for Natchez, he had 24 goals and 53 points overall. Not bad. The one answer that I can come up with is Evangelista. That's the one guy that I'm like, if you were to call Toronto and you were to say, we're interested in Mitch Marner, which, again, I'm not sure they are. And with Marner, you'd have to get him to waive his no move, and you'd probably want to sign him to an extension. They'd want Evangelista at the top of that package. And that still may not be enough. A team like Anaheim might be a little different because they are still technically rebuilding, so maybe they'll take more picks or they'll take younger prospects. But even in Anaheim, they've been rebuilding for 6 years. At some point, they're like, no, we want NHL guys in return. You don't have those guys on your team, except for Evangelista. Everybody would love, in a deal, Yossi or Forsberg, but you're not going to trade them, and they have no moves. So they're out. Saros, to teams that need goaltending, would be a premium asset, but again, I'm convinced they're not going to trade him. Barry Trotz is going to re-sign him, so he's out. Other than that, O'Reilly's old, Nyquist is average. There's not somebody that, again, Gus Nyquist, solid player, and at the trade deadline, I could see somebody wanting to deal a second-round pick for him the way that Winnipeg traded a second-round pick to you for Nino Niederreiter. But they're not going to build a package for Martin Necas or Mitch Marner or whomever. They're not going to build a package around Gus Nyquist. And I don't think that they're going to accept Reed Schaefer and a couple of picks. So if it's not Saros, I don't know exactly how they do get those kind of names. Oh, apparently Nick Keyser just sent this to me, Ian.
Okay.
This is from Pierre LeBrun.
Yeah, he has his latest piece out here about he's been talking to the GM of Carolina, Pierre has, about the Necas trade and how that could go down.
So Keyser just sent me a little nugget from the story saying, quote, one team, and how long ago did this post? Like
17 minutes.
Okay. One team to keep an eye on if Shea and this is Brady Shea or Brent Pesce go to the market, are the Nashville Predators. They need to replace Ryan McDonough, and I believe they would inquire and try to sign one of those two Carolina D if they go to market. Barry said on the show, and I have my notes here in front of me, Barry said on the show on Monday that they have a hole on the back end to fill when I asked about how active they should be in free agency.
Mm-hmm.
And so that adds up.
And as far as the Necas deal goes, one other league source or other league sources tell Pierre LeBrun that there's Pierre LeBrun.
Thank you.
That there's one team in particular that is pretty close with Carolina on the framework of a deal, and if that trade does go through, it would involve a first-round pick Friday night. So if that particular team decides to go ahead with Carolina, we will know within 48 hours. So he doesn't mention anything about the Preds in particular on Necas. The other note about the Preds in this article is the Predators also want to find some offensive pop up front. I believe they have interest in the likes of Steven Stamkos and Chandler Stevenson if those pending UFAs hit the market, among several other forward targets.
Okay, so I don't think Stamkos is hitting the market. I think Stamkos is going to resign in Tampa Bay. So I have just, in my head, I have taken Stamkos off the board. Maybe that's wrong. Maybe I should put Stamkos back on the board. I have taken Stamkos off the board, especially when the Predators traded Ryan McDonough back to Tampa Bay, and there was a report that came out that said Steven Stamkos was looped in on the mix when that was going down, and he was happy about it. So I think Stamkos is going back to Tampa Bay. I think they're going to try to run it back. So maybe I'm wrong about this, but take him out of it. Chandler Stevenson, I believe, is a second-line center in Vegas. Mm-hmm. And I believe he played for Barry Trotz in Washington, if I am not mistaken. The only reason I know this guy exists is because Willie brought him up, or somebody brought him up, or somebody wrote a story about him. It was, I can't remember. But they brought him up as like a guy that Vegas absolutely cannot pay him and bring him back, because Vegas is like still over the cap. And apparently they're trying to go get more players, which I'm sure somebody will slice their hand with a knife and they'll put them on long-term injured reserve. and they'll save that money and then bring them all back for the playoffs. But as far as the Stevenson thing, he does not pass the Jared Stillman smell test. And Ian, what is the Jared Stillman smell test?
You've heard of him.
I'd never heard of this guy. So you can tell me he's good, but I've never heard of him. And as I learned with Mikhail Granlund, if I don't know who you are, you're probably not very good. That's how I operate. Because the guys the Predators have traded for that I knew who they were, I got excited about PK Subban. I got excited about Ryan McDonough. I got excited about Ryan O'Reilly. I know who those guys are, and those guys end up being good players. I knew who James Neal was because I covered the Bruins in 2013, and James Neal was on that Pittsburgh team. They played in the Eastern Conference Final, and I believe James Neal scored 40. So I knew who that was. If I don't know who you are, I'm not interested. And so this Chandler Stevenson guy, I don't know who he is, so that means he's probably not very good. When the Predators traded for Mikhail Granlund, I didn't know who that guy was. In fact, I remember telling Ryan Ports, I'm like, I've never heard of this guy before, but the guy that I like on Minnesota is Jason Zucker. Now, Zucker ended up going to Pittsburgh at that point, but as we know, Zucker's a solid player. But they acquired Granlund, and Ports was like, no, he's good. I promise, he's good. Granlund sucked, and I'm glad he's gone. So, except that one caller that called in and said they should give up a first-round pick last year for Granlund. But again, if I don't know who you are, I'm not interested. So forget about Chandler Stevenson. If you're telling me, now they can sign guys I don't know, and they can get in there, and I'm not going to go crazy about it. Like I didn't really know anything about Luke Shin and whatever. But you can't sign a guy that I've never heard of and be like, all right, we've got a core piece. No. Can't do that. I do think the Predators could be a team that's trading a first-round pick Friday night for Martin Necas.
Could be. It says on the Necas trade, a little side note, that there seems to be frustration from other teams involved in talks with Carolina over the high asking price, which has led to some clubs chatting internally about the possibility of an offer sheet. But
nobody does those anymore.
Yeah, and the GM of Carolina says, I don't see how an offer sheet makes any sense for the player. If he wants to leave, he's giving us more control that way. He's lowering the return to where we wouldn't let him go.
Yeah,
So.
I don't think I don't think the offer sheet is I think that I think restricted free agency in both hockey and in football are like, I mean, I don't say they're collusion because they're baked into the CBA, but it's basically a franchise tag. It's like, we have your rights. We do whatever we want. And if you don't want to sign, well, we'll figure something out, but we still have an advantage here. Whereas unrestricted free agency is, if you don't get that guy back, you're screwed. Sorry about it. Is what it is. 615-737-1025. Let's get to your phones on this. 615-737-1025 here on Stillman and Company. There was one other thing Barry said on the show that did kind of stick out to me. It wasn't a huge revealing detail, like them being in on the big names, them re-signing Soros, the trade protection for. It wasn't one of those. But I did find it at least a little bit fascinating. We'll touch on that. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Let's talk Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical. Hiller, they are proud supporters of the Nashville Predators. And so let's face it when it comes to Hiller. Things often aren't as simple as they should be when it comes to your home. And this summer, Hiller is making summer simple. With real-time technician tracking, you'll know exactly when they are on the way, and you can trust that you have the best and brightest techs in your home fixing your problems on their first trip out. From now until June 30th, enjoy a free service call with work performed to take $25 off any plumbing or electrical repair. Visit happyhiller.com for details. That's Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical. Proud supporters of the Preds, the Vols, and Vandy. Hiller, call the Happy Face Truck today.
as you know, I always like to check around to see what Nashville's up to before I come on. And I had one manager who kind of laughed yesterday and said, I think Barry's going to try to keep you very busy. So I think he's got a lot of irons in the fire, and I think he's looking at a few different things. And, I think both potential, whether it's free agency or trade, I think Barry is active out there.
Okay, there you go. That was Elliot talking about, hey, Barry's got a lot of irons in the fire. And that would track with what Pierre LeBrun just said at The Athletic, which is they could be in on Brady Shea, they could be on Brent Pesce, they could be on Chandler Stevenson, they could be in on Steven Stamkos. Those are a lot of irons in the fire.
Maybe Natchez.
Did he write that they could be in on Natchez?
Not specifically. He just mentioned that a lot of teams have been, poking around.
So here's what I would say.
He mentioned Buffalo.
Buffalo.
As someone with high interest.
How do you think Buffalo feels about watching the Florida Panthers win the Cup with half their team?
Yeah, Saber's going to Saber, I guess.
I mean, that's poor Phil Housley. Anywho, so there was one thing Barry said on the show the other day, because the one thing that did stick out is that, as Ian said in Pierre's piece, he wrote that there's a team that has the framework of a Natchez deal, which would involve a first-round pick on Friday night. It would make sense for the Predators. I mean, the Predators have 2 first-round picks in next year's draft. They've got, I guess, now 4 second-round picks over the next 2 drafts as opposed to 5 because they traded one for a defense prospect with Detroit the other day. But Barry said on the show on Monday that they've been making calls trying to move up in the draft. No, I asked Barry, there was a mock draft I saw that had the Predators taking a guy who has like a low ceiling, but he's got a high floor. One of those, he's probably not going to be more than a third liner, but he's definitely going to make it to the NHL. He's not a boomer bust. And I'm like, that's the opposite of what Barry has been preaching to the scouts. Because Barry told us, he said, I've told the scouts I can go find third liners. But when it comes to getting those big boys that can play, I mean, I want some good players. And he even said there are core players. I wrote this down on my notes. There are always core players every draft when he was talking about the end of the first and the second and the, Sebastian Ahos and the Jason Robertsons and those kind of players. Braden Point. And there is some truth to that. Yeah, you're not going to get Sidney Crosby. Got it. But they can still get some good players that can be impact players and not just third-pair defensemen. But then he goes out and he trades a second-round pick for a guy who's 19 years old, who is a prospect, who is a prospect with Detroit. And then I go and I look up his breakdown on The Athletic, and they said that he profiles to be a third-pair defenseman in the NHL. I'm like, that's not the big swings Barry Trott's talking about. But I do think that it's worth noting that Barry said they're trying to move up. So if Barry says they're trying to move up, that would make it seem like maybe they're not the team working a deal for Natchez and using a first-round pick. One texter says, LOL, you do know who Mikael Granlund is now, and don't forget, the Predators are a Granlund away from the Cup. We did have a caller Scott, who likes to call in and argue with me all the time. Scott called in around the trade deadline, called the midday show, and he said that they needed to trade a first-round pick for Mikael Granlund. And Willie, entertained the idea. I texted Caroline when this guy, and I'm not going to call him a bozo because I do like Scott, but that was a very bozo-ish take. But I texted Caroline, and I said, a first-round pick for Granlund? I was like, and Willie is humoring this call. I was like, slice him up. This is crazy. And so then we talked about it, and then the caller decided to call in to defend himself, and it honestly sounded even worse. James says Askarov would be a pretty nice piece, but I don't want to move him. Yeah, I mean, if you sign Saros, then what are you going to do? You're not going to have 2 goalies. Barry even said that on the show on Monday when he said, I've been talking to some general managers, and I've said, hey, you can have 12 forwards and 6 defensemen, but you can only have one goalie. Barry told us after the McDonough trade, I said 4 years down the road when projecting this out, because if you give Saros a deal, it's going to be a 5 or a 6 year deal. Or it's going to be a 7 or an 8 year deal. So projecting 4 years from now, what are you going to do? Are you going to be able to have both goalies? And he said, no, at some point you're going to have to pick one or the other. So if you give Saros the big deal and you give Saros the trade protection, well, then you probably at some point have to turn around and trade the other guy. One texter said something that I felt was kind of hating. Michael in Clarksville says the Preds will never win the cup with Trotz or Saros in net. I tend to agree the second part. But it's not so much about Saros as much as it is about the fact that I don't really, and I know Bobrovsky just won the cup at $10 million and they got plenty of good players. I just don't really think you should pay goalies because I think goalies are so volatile. And if you got a really, 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 really good goalie, he should steal you some games that lead to you winning some of these series. And UC Saros hasn't done that. And so I would go the other direction. But they're going to go the opposite direction. But I'm not giving up on Trotz because I am a Trotz guy. Because I think Trotz is a straight shooter. And I think, that, again, the moves he's made, O'Reilly worked out. Nyquist worked out better than anybody could have imagined. The trades, Zucker was a good trade. They basically took on the money, but they didn't give up any real draft capital in order to get him. And he was probably one of their best skaters in the playoffs. By the way, I do love, Trotz came on the show. I asked him about Zucker and Sherwood. And he said, yeah, we're in agreement with those guys. They probably want a little too much money. I was like, oh, so that's the agreement they're in. 615-737-1025. Okay, so I was out last week, and I haven't gotten around to this because we had Game 7 of the Cup final. We had the Vols winning the national championship the last couple of days. But this is honestly, Ian, you don't have to co-sign on this.
Okay.
But would you co-sign that this is probably one of the stupidest things you've ever heard?
The 4 o'clock segment?
Yes.
I mean, I don't know about stupidest, but it seems a bit extreme.
It's one of the stupidest things I've heard in a long time. And it's about one of your favorite topics. We'll get to that next. Stillman & Company, 102.5-1063 The Game. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3, The Game, streaming live on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook live from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios. Last week I was in Florida visiting my grandmother. It was always great to see her. I'm going to need to go back more often than just, once a year and go check in. But it was great to have some time off and not worry about what topics to make, what to say this, what to do there. But as is normally the case, there is something that happens while I'm gone that as somebody that's always on their phone on Twitter and sees things, it's like, I want to talk about this. And so I have the opportunity to talk about something that I saw last week that blew my freaking mind. I think it's one of the stupidest things I have ever heard. Ever. Tom Pelissero, NFL Network insider, went on the Rich Eisen show. And Rich Eisen was talking to him about Trevor Lawrence's contract. And they talked about, all the money these players are making today. My dad, when Justin Herbert signed for $52 million last year, was like, they shouldn't pay the players this much money. I'm like, so what, you want to give it back to the owner? Like, if the players don't get the money, the owner gets the money. It's not like, well, we're going to give the player the money, so instead we're going to give it to charity. Like, that's not how it works. But, again, Trevor Lawrence signs for a massive amount of money. It's like, whoa. And so Rich Eisen asked Tom Pelissero about that. Tom Pelissero said this, and it blew up on the internet last week.
There certainly has been discussion within the league, Rich, among certain owners about even the idea of a quarterback cap, that at some point you want quarterback numbers to not go over a certain percentage of your salary cap. To my knowledge, that really hasn't gained traction, in part because so many teams have paid their quarterbacks. And if you went to suddenly an NBA model where all of a sudden you have the max and the super max, and there's really only a couple levels that guys can get paid at, it kind of changes the dynamics in terms of how you set yourself up salary cap wise and whatnot. So absolutely, there's been a discussion about exactly what you're talking about, which is, how are we paying this much money to this position and to certain guys just because they're the next one up? Okay.
The QB cap. The second cap. Some of these owners look at these quarterback contracts, 50 and 60 million. Whoa. That's too much money. We can't pay the quarterbacks this much money. Yes, you can. And you want to know why you're paying the quarterbacks this kind of money? Because every opportunity that you get to put a game on Netflix on Wednesday night, you make $75 million, and it's money that's got to go to the players. But this idea of a second cap, which I put in quotation marks, is truly one of the dumbest things I have ever heard. Number one, the cap is fake. We'll get more on that in a second. So we already have a fake cap now that a team can spend $350 million on a $250 million cap. So we're going to create a second cap to go with our first cap that's not even real? And if you go with the first cap that's not real, surely the second cap would be as fake, right? But this one is for the quarterbacks. So if the salary cap is $250 million, what would that break down if we were to have a second QB cap? So it'd be $200 million on one hand and $60 million for quarterbacks. So what does that mean for a team like the Titans? The Titans are paying their quarterback over 4 years, $9 million. But they wouldn't be able to get L'Jarius Sneed and Chidobe Awuzie and Tony Pollard and Calvin Ridley and Tyler Boyd and Kenneth Murray and Lloyd Cushenberry, right? Because they wouldn't be saving on the $9 million quarterback contract because that's a separate cap than the other cap. So I'm paying my quarterback $9 million over 4 years. Jacksonville's paying their quarterback $55 million a year. But outside of those two positions, we have to operate under the same cap? What? That does not make any sense. That's the first reason. The number two reason this is so stupid is because capping the QB salaries, and when I say capping, I actually mean, capping, like saying, nope, you can't spend any more, which is not what the NFL salary cap does. But for this argument, let's say we're capping, the QB salaries. Why would C.J. Stroud, for instance, be okay with that? C.J. Stroud just saw Trevor Lawrence sign for $55 million a year. Ian, who would you rather have, C.J. Stroud or Trevor Lawrence?
I mean, it's only been a year, but I guess I'll go Stroud.
Okay, I think most people would as well. Well, Tua's going to sign a contract. I wouldn't sign him, but they will. Dak Prescott's going to sign a contract before Stroud's eligible to sign a contract because he'll either sign with the Cowboys or he'll hit the market and he'll sign for even more money. And Dak's going to get into the $60 million a year range, which, ugh. But again, that's your business, not mine. Brock Purdy's going to get a contract before C.J. Stroud does. And then 2 years from now, C.J. Stroud will be up. By then, C.J. Stroud's probably looking at $300 million and $66 million a year. Especially if they keep adding Netflix and Peacock games. Why would C.J. Stroud ever be okay with that? And then what about the other players at the other positions? Look at the 49ers. The 49ers are paying Bosa and Warner and Samuel and Kittle and Williams and McCaffrey. They're paying all these players because they pay their quarterback $975,000 a year. But under the new QB cap, the 49ers would be able to look at Brandon Ayuk and say, sorry, Brandon Ayuk, we can't pay you because we're paying all these other guys. Forget about the fact that we're paying our quarterback less than $1 million. That's a different cap. Why would they be okay with that? Why would these players sit there and say, oh, okay, yeah, hey, I'll sign up for 2 caps so that the quarterbacks can get more money. The Titans are going to have to pay a backup quarterback $50 million with Levis's contract in order to get up to the cap, and it's going to have no effect on the rest of the roster. Why would L'Jarius Sneed want that? It doesn't make any sense. And then third, another reason that this is the stupidest thing, this idea of a second QB cap, and this is the real kicker here, the union is never going to go for that for the reasons I just laid out with number 2. The union is never going to agree to a second cap. They will not play football before that happens. Like, there are certain things in these negotiations that are just not, they're just no-nos. For instance, in baseball, if the owners go to the players and demand a salary cap, we're not going to play baseball. That's just how it works. So they have to come up with every verkakte way in order to not say salary cap, but to actually tamp down the salaries in Major League Baseball. The luxury tax in Major League Baseball, that is a real issue. Because in the NFL, you do whatever you want. It doesn't matter. Again, cap's fake. In baseball, they dock you draft picks. Now imagine if the Titans are picking 38th, but if they spent too much money, they got kicked down to 58th. That would matter. But again, the idea of a quote-unquote salary cap in baseball is an absolute no-no, and so they don't even go there. This would be a no-no with the players. Just like the franchise tag, which is designed to keep players like Joe Burrow stuck in Cincinnati, the franchise tag, because of what's happened in the NBA, the franchise tag is never, ever, ever, ever going to be dealt with as far as the players hate the franchise tag. And they're never, ever, ever, ever going to get rid of it. It's never going to happen. I mean, it's a reality. And so when I hear this, when I hear Tom Pelissero throw out this idea of a second cap, and then because Tom Pelissero is a pretty reputable dude, and he's with the League Network, and it's July where there's not a lot of football news because the players are away, it blows up, and everyone's like, oh, my God, what about this second? And I'm like, hold on. This is so stupid. This is never going to happen. It's not feasible. And so last week I could not believe myself when I saw that. I'm like, and I look at Pelissero, and again, this is not about him. But it's almost like, dude, don't you know better than that? Like when one owner says to you, we need a second cap for quarterback contracts, I'd look at the owner and I'd say, if I was Paul Sir, I'd be like, the union's never going to go for that. Like, you can talk about it all you want, but that's never going to happen. But, oh well. 615-737-1025. So I think this is a good opportunity to do something that I think a lot of you want to know. In fact, there is a Reddit post with like 200 comments to it or whatever that says, Jared Stillman says the cap is fake. What does he mean by that? So now I'm going to explain this. This is going to be, I think we've got time to do it. This is going to be the explanation of how the salary cap is fake. If you think that you are so certain that the NFL salary cap is real and that when a team tells you we can't pay our players because of the cap and you say, oh, it's the cap, it's not my cheap owner. If you think that's the case, go ahead and change the channel. But I'm going to explain it, and I guarantee you, well, I can guarantee, I feel pretty certain a lot of you are smart enough to understand this. We'll get to that next. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106 for the game.
there's a cap, but there's also cash flow. So I can sign a player, let's say, to a $4 million contract for his base salary, and I'm going to give him a $4 million signing bonus. How the cap works is I can prorate that out, so it's $2 million a year for over those 4 years. But from a cash standpoint, I'm giving him $4 million to sign the contract and $1 million in the first year. So that's $5 million cash out the door, even though it only counted $2 million against the cap. So there's cap accounting and then there's cash accounting. And so the owner don't care about the cap. That's what you have a cap guy to do. It's the cash going out the door.
There you go. That was Rick Spielman, former NFL general manager on SiriusXM NFL Radio. And he's telling you straight up, he's like, the owner doesn't care about the cap. Because the cap, the owner cares about the cash. And so I have said many times, whenever we have a discussion about, why should they be able to get this guy or this team should add this guy or whatever, and they're like, well, Jared, you can't do it because of the cap. Cap's fake. Don't ever let somebody tell you that you can't do something because of the NFL salary cap. If you want to tell me you can't do it because of the NHL's cap, that's a different discussion, though the Vegas Golden Knights are starting to kind of finagle with that. But there is even a Reddit thread. It was apparently, I went back during the break to look at this. It was posted 92 days ago. Can someone explain why Jared Stillman thinks the salary cap is fake? Jared Stillman is constantly saying the cap is fake and offering anecdotal evidence about certain teams are always way over and then manage to make it work. It seems like another one of his hot takes, but I'd still like to understand his argument. Well, now we have the opportunity to do this because of that stupid Tom Pelissero second QB cap, and we've got some time on our hands. So let's talk about it. The NFL salary cap exists for the purpose of capping salaries, right? That's what we would all think. I mean, that's what a cap is.
To even the playing field.
Yes, that's what a cap is. Owners want caps. Why? Because they don't want to spend a gazillion dollars. So the cap in the NFL right now is around $250 million. As of Monday, 22 teams are spending more money than that this season. 22 of 32 are spending more money than the cap. It's not really doing a good job of capping things, is it? Philadelphia is spending $345 million. Again, this is a $250 million cap, and they're spending $345 million. The Bears are spending $259 million. That's a big difference, right? 345, 259. 10 teams are spending, quote unquote, under that cap, including Dallas, who's only spending $219 million this year on their team. Now, if they ever get off their asses and sign Dak, CeeDee Lamb, and Parsons, they'll be spending more money, but right now they're spending $219 million. So the Philadelphia Eagles are spending $126 million more on their football team than the Dallas Cowboys. Ian, what did you say the purpose of this cap is?
Well, I think originally it was to kind of even the playing field so everybody kind of pays the same amount of money for their players and their team. Does
$126 million sound like an even playing field?
I don't guess so.
But see, this is why the fake cap exists. The Philadelphia Eagles want to win. They want to have a great team. They want to win. So we want to pay A.J. Brown, and we want to pay Devontae Smith, and we want to pay a running back, Saquon Barkley, and we want to pay Jalen Hurts $50 million, and we want to pay our offensive line. And yeah, the fake cap exists so an angry Dallas Cowboy fan that watches their team do nothing in free agency as Tony Pollard goes to the Titans or Tyler Biadasz goes to the Commanders can be told by their owner, we can't give you Derrick Henry because of the cap. Do not blame us. Do not blame the fact that we're cheap and we just don't want to spend the money. Blame the cap. In fact, that's exactly what Stephen Jones did when he went on Shine on Sports with Adam Shine on Sirius XM after Derrick Henry signed with the Ravens and was asked, why didn't you sign Derrick Henry?
Nothing but respect for Derrick Henry. I mean, he's one of the top backs in this league. He's had one of the great careers in this league. I wish him nothing but the best with the Ravens. Sure, a great place for him. Our situation is just, and no one ever wants to say it, but it's salary cap. And we just didn't, have the money to allocate to that position.
Oh, nobody wants to say it, but it's the cap. We can't afford them. Now, they paid Zeke a ton of money before that. They paid Tony Pollard $10+ million last year. Derek got $9 million from the Ravens. Derek has made a note. He wanted to be a Cowboy. But we couldn't do it because of the cap, as they spend $219 million. Meanwhile, the Eagles pay their quarterback in the 50s. They pay one receiver, AJ, in the 30s. They pay Devontae in the 20s. 2 tackles. They're paying their left tackle, Mailata, their right tackle, Lane Johnson. They've got a defense, and they go out this offseason and sign Saquon Barkley and Bryce Huff. By the way, I looked it up today. A.J. Brown's cap number, remember, he signed that massive contract for $32 million a year. A.J.'s cap number is $11 million this season. A.J. Brown has been paid $55.8 million by the Eagles. And guess how much money he has counted against the Eagles' cap over the last 3 seasons? 13.9. Why? Because in the NFL, you can redo any contract whenever you want, make it a signing bonus, add void years to the deal, spread it out over 5, and then next year, do the same thing again. Some people call this cash over cap, which means that if you're willing to spend the cash, you can go over the cap. I just call it what it is. It's fake. It doesn't matter. It doesn't stop teams from signing players. What stops teams from signing players are budgets. When an owner goes to his general manager, just like Rick Spielman said, when he said the owner don't care about the cap, the owner goes to the general manager and says, hey, you've got $250 million to spend. You've got $360 million to spend. You've got whatever. And then the general manager acts accordingly. Well, we've only got $20 million towards our budget until we hit it, so we can't sign that $30 million player. By the way, guess what? Every other business does that too. If you work for a business, I'm sure your manager has a budget. Every year they sit down and they map out the budget. Again, nobody in the NFL, and I'm talking about in the NFL, the general managers, the owners, nobody in the NFL makes a decision because of the cap. They just tell you that they do because they don't want you to be mad at them. And then for whatever reason, the media constantly obliges. Adam Schefter, well, they're trying to work out the cap. Tom Pelissero, well, they're trying to fit this in the cap. Ian Rappaport, the cap. It's so disingenuous. I saw Ian Rappaport had a tweet last week. You talk about disingenuous. I mean, it was, it almost made me throw up. Here, let me pull it up because I sent it to an agent because I saw it and I was like, you got to be kidding me. Ladd McConkey signed his contract, and you know how all these deals are slotted in the draft? Like,
sure.
You know how much money the guy's going to make? The Chargers and Ladd McConkey reached a 4-year deal today with the most guaranteed money in NFL history for the 34th pick. Well, no duh. It's the most money for the 34th pick because the money gets bigger every year. Next year's 34th pick will also sign for the most money in the history of the 34th pick. Rappaport continues in his tweet. It beat the QB premium for the same pick in 2023, which I don't think is true because Levis was the 33rd pick. And again, McConkey was 34 because the 32nd pick, the Dolphins' first rounder, had been taken away for the tampering. But again, I guess Ian didn't do his homework there. It beat the QB premium for the same pick in 23, carrying the most guarantees, a pick below in the round. Ladd's agent, Chris Cabot, confirmed the deal. Ian Rappaport, let's shout out the agent. And let's, again, he's not lying when he says that it's the most money guaranteed in the history of the 34th pick, but that's because it gets bigger every year. But he's doing the agent a solid. And when the media sits there and tells you about the cap, they're doing the owners a solid. The owners want the fans. Dallas is the example. The owners want the fans to think, we can't have Derrick Henry because of the cap, just like Stephen Jones said. When Philadelphia is able to sign Saquon Barkley for more money than Derrick signed in Baltimore. The Cowboys, who are they paying at receiver? They haven't paid CeeDee Lamb yet. Who's Philadelphia paying at receiver? Oh, yeah. A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith. They're paying 2 tackles. They're paying a tight end. They just added a pass rusher. What don't the Eagles have? That's why they spend $100 million over the quote-unquote cap. And it doesn't matter. So don't ever listen to somebody when they tell you the cap. And when somebody says, what does Jared Stillman mean when he says the cap is fake? This is what I'm talking about. The idea that one team can spend almost $100 million over the cap and that a team in the exact same division is spending $126 million less on their team and is then saying, well, we couldn't do it because of the cap, is a lie. And that's what makes it fake. It doesn't cap any spending. It doesn't do anything except give the owners an excuse. 615-737-1025. I'm sure we got phones on it. We'll get to that. 615-737-1025. Stillman and Company, 1025, 106 through the game. Do you agree with me that the cap's fake?
Not fake. I think it can be really, really creative, and we were. Look.
But then it doesn't cap spending. And you were creative in Atlanta. And then Atlanta pursues Deshaun Watson, and so they trade Matt Ryan, and they say, we had to trade Matt Ryan because of the cap. And I'm like, you can't go try to sign Deshaun Watson and say, it was the money.
It was. When I look back on that, of course, as a bystander now, I won't even get into it, but it's, no, I get it. There's an element. We never call it fake, of course. We just say
that's because the owners want the cap to be real, so they can tell the fans,
no question,
we couldn't keep him because of the cap.
Well, in Arthur Blank, I mean, one of the things that I really valued about him is he never asked me to have $40 million cap space. He said, you pay what you need to pay. And when we would have $10 or $15 million left, he would come knocking on my door. TD, let's bring us another free agent. What can we get? And I say that in a respectful way because we could be creative with what you're talking about.
It's a budget. It's a money thing, not a cap thing.
It's exactly right.
Thank you, Thomas Dimitrov, general manager on our show at the Super Bowl. You heard it right there when I was like, the owners want the cap so that they can say, oh, we couldn't sign. We suck because of the cap. No. And even I was like, it's money. That's what stops it. Yeah, Arthur Blank never came to me and said, how much cap space do we have? Because it doesn't matter. Rick Spielman said on SiriusXM, the owner don't care about the cap. But yet, it'll happen soon enough. Somebody will say, oh, we couldn't sign this guy because of the cap, Jared. That's why we're stuck with Aaron Brewer and Andre Dillard. Phone line driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Jim has been waiting patiently and is up next here on the program. Thank you for calling. What's up, Jim?
Hey, Jared, I'm going to disagree with you about it being fake, and just hear me out. I'll try to keep it simple. It's just kind of like a business. If you buy a machine for $100 million, you write a check, that's out the door. But you only have to expense it, amortize it, allocate it, $20 million each year over 5 years. So when you submit to the IRS, here's my P&L, you're only going to show an expense of $20 million. Same thing with football players. They could get to a point where even when you allocate it over the future years, you will reach this cap, whatever the amount is. That's my point. Thank you.
So then why does nobody ever do that?
I don't know that they have. Well, some guys have kept it under. They have kept it under the limit.
No, there's never been a team that has not been able to move a contract that they've wanted to move. The Rams gave Jared Goff all that money, and they were able to move it and bring in Matthew Stafford. The Broncos gave that ridiculous contract to Russell Wilson, and they've been able to move it. I keep hearing about these dead cap hits, Jared, and then it seems to never affect anybody. The money's real. Now, make no mistake about it. The money is real, and owners, I don't think Amy would allow the Titans to spend $345 million on her team because she don't have the money. But at the end of the day, it's not about the cap.
I'll disagree. And they can redo contracts. Whole different story. Rip up the contract, do it for a different amount, or kick the can down the road further. But there is a legitimate cap, and if you were to follow the rules, there is a limit, and teams do stop.
So what? Okay, where is a team that stopped because of the cap?
I'll have to look that up and get back to you.
It doesn't exist. Jim, thank you for the call. It doesn't exist. The Philadelphia Eagles, again, the 49ers had a top 4 payroll, and they just gave Christian McCaffrey a new contract. It doesn't stop. The only thing that stops the spending is the money. And again, I don't know about that IRS stuff. That it would not surprise me. And I don't know about this. I'm not a CPA. I have never taken a finance class in my life. It would not surprise me if the tax code and the IRS is as fakakta as the salary cap in the NFL. It would not surprise me at all. But the caller just used that, and so did a texter. Used a term that people say, well, they can kick the can down the road, but eventually it catches up with them. Does it? When has it caught up with the Rams? Remember the Rams, they spent all that money on all those players? When did the kicking the can down the road catch up to the Rams? Well, the Rams had a bad season 2 years ago, but the reason they had a bad season is because Matthew Stafford got hurt. Everybody uses the Saints as the example. Everybody says, well, the cap's real because the Saints kick the can down the road every single year, and that's why the Saints suck. Except that's not true. Because even though the Saints, quote unquote, kick the can down the road, the Saints are still able to go out and sign free agents. The Saints are still able to go out and get Derek Carr and give him a $100 million contract. Now, is Derek Carr a good quarterback? That's a different discussion. But it's not the cap that's standing in the way of whether or not Derek Carr sucks. It's Derek Carr's ability. They paid Derek Carr on the market because, again, like Cousins in Atlanta, there's only so many quarterbacks to go around. So if you don't pay top dollar, you're not going to get the guy, even if he's average. So they paid Derek Carr. The problem is Derek Carr ain't that good. You know that it's a team that hasn't had a problem with the cap over the years? The Patriots. So since 2020, the Patriots and the Saints have both sucked. The Saints are the team that kicks the can down the road every year, including this year, by the way, where they started off the offseason with minus $80 million in salary cap space and now have $12 million in salary cap space. And they didn't cut their quarterback, and they didn't cut Alvin Kamara, and they didn't cut any of the great players they had on their team, did they? But the Saints have been terrible since 2020. Why? Is it because they've been kicking the can down the road? Or is it because Drew Brees retired and Drew Brees was really good? Oh, yeah. The Patriots have had tons of cap space, right? Remember, Tom Brady took less for the cap all those years. The Patriots suck too. You want to know why? Because they don't have Tom Brady anymore. The Denver Broncos won the Super Bowl in 2015. Peyton Manning retired. The Broncos have spent $1 gazillion, and they haven't won anything. Was it because of the cap, or was it because Peyton retired? Again, you guys tell me that, no, eventually it catches up with you. When will it catch up with the Eagles? When will the Eagles not be able to give A.J. Brown $32 million a year? When will the Eagles not be able to pay Jalen Hurts $50+ million a year? When will the Eagles not be able to go out and sign Saquon Barkley? Somebody tell me this. What's funny is when I first realized this, I used to believe in the salary cap. I swear to you, I really did. I'm embarrassed to say so. It's a reality that I don't want to admit. But at one point in time, I did believe in the NFL salary cap. And I used to do all the, the Titans have $13 million in space and I want to sign so-and-so. Well, how do we make that work? Okay, well, if we give him a contract and then we restructure Lawan and then we add this guy here, and there's no point in doing this. Because you can do whatever you want. But once I grew smart to it, I kept saying for what it was. And all the old heads that have been brainwashed by the media, the local media people that have just hear the national media like Adam Schefter talk about the cap, they're like, no, that's not true. Led by Joe. And so I started Googling, salary cap. And there was like a Forbes article or a New York Times article, or I can't remember, but it was like, the NFL salary cap's going to catch up to these two teams, the Rams and the Eagles. And it never did. Remember the dead cap charge for Carson Wentz's contract? Oh, yeah. They were in the Super Bowl 2 years later because they were able to get A.J. Brown. I guess kicking the can down the road didn't hurt them that bad. They made the playoffs the year after they traded for Wentz. They made the Super Bowl the year after that. Did they have to get rid of Lane Johnson? Did they have to get rid of Jason Kelsey? Did they have to get rid of good players? No. Now, what happens is this. Sometimes there will be a guy that's due $12 million. And the team looks at this player and says, he's not really worth $12 million. And again, we go back to the budget. The owner comes down and says, you've got $280 million in cash to spend this year. That's it. So we're sitting here with our cash budget, and we're at $274 million, and we're paying this guy $12 million, and we don't think he's very good, and his money's not guaranteed. We think he's more of a $6 million player now than he is a $12 million player, like Kevin Byard. We think he's more of a $6. I think Byard was due $13 million, and he's making $6 now. We think he's more of a $6 million player. Well, I can get rid of that $12 million, and I've got $6 million right now to spend it towards my phony baloney cap. Now I just created an extra $18 million. Now I can go sign 4 more players. That's real. But that's an owner's budget, which is decided individually by the teams. Just like what Thomas Dimitroff said. I also laugh how that guy stayed on hold. We play that cut from a guy who was a GM for 15 years, and he's like, yeah, no, that's not true. One texter says, hey, Jared, you are right. It's never caught up because the cap is continually rising. If the cap were to ever stop rising, then these kick the can down the road contracts would come due. But it doesn't, and it hasn't, and we keep seeing it happen in the future the way these sports leagues keep raking in the dough. The NBA has their viewership falling, and they doubled their money, which is unbelievable. One texter says, I mean this with all due respect, but listening to you talk about the cap is reminding me of a conspiracy theorist trying to convince all of his friends about different theories. Yeah, I get that. I understand that it sounds like that. And I know what, like, these QAnon people, like, I know how crazy that stuff sounds. Open your eyes. But how many times do you have to go watch another team go out there when we're told, oh, the Buffalo Bills, they can't do anything. They're going to be strapped by the cap. There's nothing they can do. And they go out and sign a player. How many times do you have to see that before you realize that your team can sign players too? They just don't want to because they reach their cash budget. Texture says a team can only kick the can so far down the road. The reason it's never happened is because the team can back off spending before it is evident. I agree you are right in the limited way you think about it. When do the Eagles have to stop spending? Somebody help me on the Eagles. When do the Eagles have to stop spending? And you can't say that the Jalen Hurts contract, when he was on a rookie deal the year they went to the Super Bowl, counts because, again, they were paying all the quote-unquote dead money from Carson Wentz because they gave him a humongous signing bonus. Matthew says, the Pittsburgh Steelers don't suck. Their owner is just cheap as hell and only spends money on defense rather than the entire team. What would you say about a team like the Steelers that are always spending under the cap? They don't stink per se, but Art Rooney is cheap, and he and Tomlin only spend money on defense. Okay, so I don't know the specifics about the Steelers. They paid Ben a lot of money, right? They paid Antonio Brown a lot of money. They paid Le'Veon Bell a lot of money when they had good players. The problem with the Steelers is they really haven't had a lot of good players over the years, except T.J. Watt and Minka Fitzpatrick. And so the reason the Steelers are spending money is because the Steelers are drafting well or trading well. In the case of Fitzpatrick, they're getting good players on defense. They're not getting good players on offense. The Steelers have never been a big spender in free agency. That has never been the Steelers' thing. That's just kind of who they are. One texter says, do bonuses count against the cap? Yes. But you can spread them out over the years and add void years, and you can do whatever you want. One texter says, the funny part about this is I actually believe your conspiracy theory. It's not a conspiracy theory. It's reality. Again, Ian, get that Thomas Dimitroff cut for me one more time. This guy was a general manager in the NFL for 15 years and was the general manager of a team that had a 25-point lead in the Super Bowl. If you got a 25-point lead in the Super Bowl, there's nothing the GM can do at that point to stop you from pooping your pants. At that point, he's done his job. Just like how, have you seen Kenny Hollins getting fired in Edmonton? And it's like, I'm sorry, was Game 7 of the Cup final not good enough? What? But listen to this guy who was a GM for 15 years. Play the cut. Do you agree with me that the cap's fake?
Not fake. I think it can be really, really creative, and we were. Look.
But then it doesn't cap spending. And you were creative in Atlanta. And then Atlanta pursues Deshaun Watson, and so they trade Matt Ryan, and they say, we had to trade Matt Ryan because of the cap. And I'm like, you can't go try to sign Deshaun Watson and say, it was the money.
It was. When I look back on that, of course, as a bystander now, I won't even get into it, but it's, no, I get it. There's an element. We never call it fake, of course. We just say.
That's because the owners want the cap to be real so they can tell the fans,
no question.
We couldn't keep him because of the cap. Did you hear what he just said? When I said that, he goes, of course, no question. He's telling you it's fake without saying it's fake because the owners don't want you to think it's fake. Oh, my goodness gracious. All right, I'm done talking about that. If anybody ever asks again, just remember that. Coming up next, I am surprised. I got to give credit to the Tennessee Volunteers in an even bigger way than just the championship. Maybe not bigger, but a different way than just the championship. I want to do that next. And it is something, if you're one of these people that thinks I never admit that I'm wrong, I was wrong completely on. We'll do that next. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game.
Now we are going to go back to Omaha because Peyton Manning is saying some words. We're going to hear from that VFL now.
Omaha.
It's awesome. It's awesome. I don't know any other word to describe it, right? We've been knocking on the door these past several years, and we've been close, kind of had our heart ripped out, but you keep fighting, right? You don't say, hey, that was our shot, now, we're never get another shot. You just keep fighting, right? And I kind of live that as a player, and I have a real appreciation for Tony and these players for just continuing to fight and saying, hey, we're doing something right. Let's just keep knocking on the door. Let's keep sawing wood, and good things are going to happen, and it sure did happen tonight in Omaha.
That was Peyton Manning the other night, and I do want to give a congratulations to the Tennessee Volunteers, not for winning the championship. We did that yesterday. But the TV ratings are out. The Vols crushed it. According to Sports Media Watch, Monday's winner-take-all Game 3 averaged 3.34 million viewers opposite Game 7 of the Cup final. It was the second largest audience ever for a men's College World Series game on the ESPN networks, but it was down 7% from last year's 3.59 million. More on that in a second. The Volunteers' win delivered the largest baseball or softball audience on television this year, surpassing the 2.91 million for a regional MLB window of Fox that featured the Dodgers and the Yankees in most markets. So let's start with this. Tennessee drew 93% of the highest audience ever for a College World Series game, and it was going up against Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Final. I'm not somebody that lives in this, well, if this hadn't happened, if the receiver didn't break his hand, if the ref didn't make that call, I don't live in that world. Because it's easy to excuse everything if you do that. But I do think it's fair to say that if there wasn't Game 7 of the Cup Final on Monday night, the Vols would have beaten last year with LSU in Florida. I think it's fair to say. Because as a sports fan, I was conflicted between the baseball game and the hockey, and I primarily went with the hockey. And so I got to believe 7% of the audience, was probably, I don't want to say on my side, but there was at least 7% that would have watched baseball if they didn't have the option to watch hockey. So that's the first thing. Unbelievable viewership, considering it was going up against Game 7 of the Cup Final. That's like the Braves had a 12 million viewer rating for a World Series game going up against the Cowboys on Sunday Night Football. I'm like, that's incredible. Also, I was wrong on both fronts. I was wrong about the NHL. They got 7.7 million. I thought they'd get 10 in my predictions before the game, and I was wrong about the College World Series. I did not think the Vols, my prediction was the Vols would not get to last year's number, which is technically true. But I thought the Vols would get 2.95 million. I did not think they'd crack 3 million. They cracked 3.34 million. That's an incredible number. That's incredible. And let me say this. The moron that thought it was a good idea at ESPN to play the Stanley Cup Final and the College World Series on the same day should be fired. Because if they hadn't had that, I'm thinking that hockey would have gotten closer to 10 million. They probably wouldn't have gotten 10 million, but they probably would have gotten closer. And the Vols might have gotten into 4 million viewers had they done that. And you can say, well, it's not ESPN, it's the leagues. Well, then they're even stupider. Because the leagues are the ones that really care about the ratings, because the leagues are the ones that when these deals come up, go over to the networks and say, hey, we're drawing 10 million viewers. You got to give us the dough. And as we've seen with the NBA, if you can get 10 million viewers, occasionally they'll give you $6 billion or $200 billion or whatever it is. George is up next here on the salary cap. He is an Eagles fan. Thank you for calling. George, you go ahead.
Hey, Jared, I think I can help you out here on this cap thing. I will tell you, not a cap expert. I do think it's real, but I do think it's kind of loosey-goosey compared to where it used to be, and it is harder to get in trouble. But having said that, you keep referencing the Eagles, but think about it. Well, they have a lot of skilled positions. When is the last linebacker you've seen on the Eagles that's been good, right? I could go on and on, year upon year upon year, with a little Tennessee flavor. I can remember
think Bryce Huff's good?
What's that?
You don't think Bryce Huff's good, the guy they just signed in free agency who had all those sacks for the Jets?
Yeah, but they gave up.
He plays linebacker.
Hassan Reddick.
Right, because
but
Bryce
he's
Huff's
more of a
better.
pass rusher. But they gave up Hassan Reddick to get him, right? So that's kind of a trade-off.
Right, because
So
Bryce Huff makes more money.
But, okay, I hear you.
You own the team, right? Nobody
Yeah.
has infinity dollars, right?
Correct.
Okay, so you own the team, and you want to win the Super Bowl. And you have told your guys, like, hey, in order for us to make a profit, we can only spend $350 million on the team. And they want to go get Bryce Huff because they think Bryce Huff is a 9 out of 10, and they've got Hassan Reddick, who they think is a 7.5 out of 10.
Okay.
They can't have both guys, or else they'll go over the $350 million. And Hassan Reddick probably isn't going to like the idea of Bryce Young taking all of his playing time, and then he goes to the coach and says, I want to trade.
What is your 350 a cash number or a cap number? Because
It's a cash number. It's 345. The cap is 250.
Okay, so I agree with you. Cash doesn't matter, right? But for a cap number,
No, you're wrong.
Why not?
Cash matters. Cash matters. Nobody has infinity dollars, right, George?
They don't. But Jeff Lurie's going to spend. I agree with you, but he's still going to spend money, right? So,
but he's not going to spend infinity because he doesn't have infinity. That's the point.
right, but he also has a cap, right? Why not? Why not address the middle linebacker position? Why did I watch Nicholas Morrow last year when he probably could have spent just a couple more million to get a better player? I would argue it's the cap. Why do we dump that safety to the Titans? Actually, he stunk. We could have paid more.
That's why they dumped him. In your opinion, you're like, oh, I mean, why did we dump that safety? He sucked. They dumped him because you think he sucks, George. That's why.
No, he does suck.
Again,
but
the
why not?
money is not. Hold on, hear me out. The money is not infinity, right?
Agreed.
Because nobody has infinity dollars. Jeffrey Lurie's going to spend. Do you think Jeffrey Lurie tells Howie Roseman, you can spend $500 million?
Probably not. It sounds like a big number.
Okay, so he's probably telling him, hey, man, here's the budget for this year. So when Howie Roseman's looking at it and he's saying, we want A.J. Brown, we want Devontae Smith, we want the 2 tackles, we want the tight end, we want Saquon Barkley, we want Jalen Hurts, we want all these guys. He's probably saying, okay, the budget's $360, we're at $345. Well, how can we clear up some money so that we can go get some more guys? Well, let's get rid of the safety we don't like very much. Doesn't that make a lot of sense?
Yeah.
So the money
with
is
you.
what matters because you're now saving $14 million by moving off of that guy. Thank you, George. You're now saving $14 million by moving off of that guy. $14 million cash. When you say, well, he's got to have a cap, no, he has a cash budget, just like every other business in America, period, because nobody has infinity dollars. Joe is up next. Ian, do we know if Caroline's going to be with us for this?
I do not know that for sure.
So we'll see one way or another?
Yeah.
Jared versus Joe is next. If not, Ian has the questions. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106 the game. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game, streaming live on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook live from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios. It is time for the biggest debate of the week in America. Jared versus Joe. Caroline not with us this week. So, Ian, you are in Caroline's place in the questions chair. Do you think you can handle the pressure?
I'll try my best.
Somebody on the text line brought up the idea that maybe the text line should be the judge. I'm going to let Ian be the judge on this one, but maybe we see. Now, Caroline will be with us for Jared versus Joe going forward, but it's also not a bad idea. But with that, it's time for, again, the most important debate of the week, Jared versus Joe.
Jared Stillman versus Joe Rexrode. Now on Stillman and Company.
On ESPN.
102.5 The Game.
Jared versus Joe is brought to you by Pella Windows and Doors of Nashville. Joe, congratulations to your Tennessee Volunteers on winning the championship, and congratulations to you for getting to be there in person to see it.
Oh, yes. Thank you. Is that this week I'm GB Joe?
Mm-hmm. I mean,
okay. Yeah.
Didn't see you in Vancouver covering the Predators, Joseph.
So that's like that would have been me being a Preds fan then if I was? What does it mean?
No, I'm just saying
yourself.
that, if you were covering them equally and fair and balanced, you would have been in Vancouver covering the Predators. You just weren't because it wasn't important to you, but the Vols in Omaha because that's your team.
Hey, I'm playing for the championship, sure. Or versus the first round, but yeah, whatever. Whatever you think, buddy.
Ian, lead us off.
Okay, well, let's start with some of this College World Series stuff. The Vols won their first national title in baseball. So let's just get right down to it. Who is now the better program, Vanderbilt baseball or Tennessee baseball? Joe, go ahead first.
Okay, well, I mean, we already had the debate before, of course, and my argument for Tennessee before, was obviously really the biggest thing was knowing that you've got a long time with Vitello, whereas there's some uncertainty with Corbin's at a point where, I just don't know. The game has changed a lot. Clearly, he's in on this, and so I think that's great for Vanderbilt fans. But yeah, I'm not gonna change my answer based on Tennessee winning the national championship. I mean, that is an accelerator that takes you to a totally different level. Nothing can be.
So, what was your
away
answer
from
then?
Tennessee. My answer then was Tennessee. You don't remember the debate?
Not particularly.
So your argument was the historical achievement, which, like I said, that's not what I'm arguing. I'm not arguing who has accumulated more over history or done more over time. Of course, that's Vanderbilt. But right now, which to me is where are you as a program? What are you doing right now?
But didn't you base this off of the Kentucky football had a better program than Tennessee in 2019 or something, which was just ridiculous, even though Tennessee sucked then?
Well, that was because I brought that up because Robbie got mad at me for saying Kentucky was a better program. That was when Tennessee was doggy doo-doo with Jeremy Pruitt, right? Right at that point, Kentucky had stability and consistent winning, even if it wasn't a championship contender. Tennessee, though the resources were certainly better, the history way better, Tennessee was just in a bad place. I mean, the program is, when it comes down to who's the better program, that's really code for, who's the better performing coach at that point. I mean, really, in my opinion, unless there's just a huge disparity in, resources and just the access to talent, the ability to win. But right now, I mean, Tennessee's the best program in college baseball.
So I agree that Tennessee is the better program now. I do think it is the championship that is what pole vaulted Tennessee over Vanderbilt. But your kind of definition of what's the better program, I'm not sure I vibe with at all. And I use that Kentucky-Tennessee football one as kind of a base point. Even in 2019 or 2020, you would have thought over the next 15 years Kentucky was going to win more than Tennessee in football?
No, but see, the 15 is ridiculous. I mean, you can't go more than 5. You have to go with who's the coach now and what's the next recruiting cycle look like for that coach versus that coach.
No. It's bigger than that. And I'll give you an example of how it's bigger than that, which is what's the better program in college baseball, Texas or Texas A&M?
Honestly, that's a great question. I mean, Texas A&M has everything that you'd want. Now, they just lost their coach to Texas, so I'll pick Texas. And I probably would pick Texas anyway, but I don't think that's a good comparison.
Well, but Texas had won since Augie won, I believe, in 2005.
You're saying Texas had not won?
Right. I don't think Texas has won the title since Augie, may he rest in peace, one of the best baseball coaches of all time, won in 2005. And A&M was just in the championship game. And so, to me, I agree with you that Tennessee as vaulted ahead of Vanderbilt. But your logic for how you got there, I completely disagree with you on. When I say that I think Tennessee is now the better program, who has the better record all time? Tennessee. Who has the better head-to-head record? Tennessee. Who has the better recent success? Tennessee. Does Vanderbilt have better resources than Tennessee, i.e. what Texas has over A&M? I would argue that they don't. And then I do think, to your point, I do think that it's okay to project a little bit, but when it comes to what's the better program, I'm not sure we necessarily can give you credit for Freeman Stinks is a great football program, and Notre Dame one day will still be good. No, Nebraska was a great football program. I'm not convinced they will be good. With Vandy, I think Vanderbilt is good because of one reason, and it's Tim Corbin, and I think he's lost his fastball. And so at this point, even though they have more national titles, I think Tennessee's a bigger draw. I think Tennessee has better resources. I think Tennessee has a better all-time record. I think Tennessee's better head-to-head. I think Tennessee has the younger, better coach. And Tennessee now has a national championship, so Vanderbilt can't play that you haven't won the title card. So to me, it's Tennessee. We're in agreement on that, but I think your logic of how you got there's off.
Okay. I see you're trying to do the word count championship again today. Good job.
You talked forever about your whole reason and why you thought that they were better than Vandy because you thought that Kentucky football was going to be better than a better program than Tennessee. You call me when they start putting Kentucky football college game day on a consistent basis, and then we can talk. Ian, what's next?
Okay, to this point, is Tony Vitello the best college baseball coach in the country? Jared, go ahead.
I think he is. I think that we have to look at, the way that we should look at college sports, but especially college baseball and maybe even women's basketball, the sports that have really elevated over the last couple of years and maybe even basketball, men's basketball, we should look at it as before NIL and after NIL. It's like AD and BC, right? It's different times. And in this era, Tony Vitello has dominated the sport. 3 College World Series in 4 years. The year they didn't go, they were the best team in the country. It's the best team he's had was the team that didn't go to Omaha. He's won a national title. And even the best coaches, the best coach, Corbin's a good example of this. His best team was 2007. And he won a title in a year that he didn't have his best team in 14. It's hard in baseball. Bobby Cox won a World Series, won his best team, but he still won a World Series. And so you're not going to always win, even when you're the best team in baseball, but the best end up winning enough, right? Like Earl Weaver maybe didn't win every year, but Earl Weaver was going to win titles. Sparky Anderson was going to win titles because they're the best. And in today's climate, I think Vitello is perfect for the school he's at. I think he's got the best personality for that school. I think he's an incredible recruiter. I think that he has worked the transfer portal and NIL perfectly. And the winning and the proof is in the pudding with the results. I think he's the best coach in college baseball. And the only other guy that would be in the discussion, there's 2 other. There's Jay Johnson, who certainly is in the discussion. And then there's old buddy from A&M, who's now at Texas, who deserves the A-hole of the year award for how he acted the other day. And he's great, but he can't win the title. I'll go Vitello.
So Tim Corbin doesn't get in the discussion?
No. Tim Corbin has lost his fastball. I mean, I wouldn't. I'm telling you right now. Again, I can't rank them for you. Tim Corbin's a Hall of Fame coach. I think we can all agree on that, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Corbin's probably not even like one of the 10 best coaches in today's game with NIL and everything else.
Nah, that's a hot take. Look, Corbin 3 years ago played on the last day of the season, and they lost, but that was going for his third title. And I will agree with you. I think Vitello is the best coach right now. I also think that you're minimizing a little bit the scope of what he's done. NIL started on July 1st, 2021. That was a couple weeks or whatever, a week after Vitello's first trip to Omaha. In 2020, before that season, got eliminated by COVID, I think the Vols were like 15-1. They were going to be tremendous in 2020. He performed a dramatic turnaround before any of this stuff started. So let's remember that. Let's also remember that his team the other night that won the championship had a whole bunch. It was way heavier on homegrown high school recruited players than it was portal additions. Some good portal ads, no doubt, but way more homegrown high school recruited players. So I don't disagree that he has attacked this era very effectively, but he was attacking this job and building great teams before NIL was something that anyone had ever uttered. So I think you got to give him a little bit more credit than that.
Okay, so I know this isn't the question, but you said it was July of 21, which is when NIL started?
Right.
And Tim Corbin's lost in the regional in the 3 years since NIL started.
Yes. No.
And
listen,
so you still think he's a top 10 coach in the game?
Yes, and look, they've adapted now. Look, early on, Corbin, I give him credit, actually, because he had the guts to be outspoken and say what all the other coaches wanted to say. But he has had to look at reality and say, look, it's either you get into this. And it's not like he's just realizing this now. He knew this before. A year ago, he knew this. And Vanderbilt is playing on the same field right now. Now, look, they haven't had, like this last couple teams, they haven't had the power hitting you need. That is the game right now. So there's some things that he has to do in terms of roster adjustment. But also, some of the guys who would be mashing home runs for Vanderbilt simply sign with the pros, and that's the problem. When you recruit at the level they recruit at and that Tennessee recruits at, Tennessee is the number one recruiting class right now. Okay? So, hey, there it is, right? But my understanding is they might really feel the pain this year of maybe reaching a little too high with some guys who were just going to go to and sign with the pros. I mean, that's part of this job too, right?
So I was told by a minor league coach today, I was told that NIL has changed everything because in baseball, a lot of these guys, apparently some guy was offered fifth-round money at Arkansas, and he turned it down because he called Dave Van Horn and said, it's $200,000. And Van Horn got him $200,000, and the players are looking at it today saying, why play in these crappy stadiums in front of nobody, making no money after the signing bonus, when I can go play college where I get the best strength coaches, the best coaches, the great facilities, I get my rear end wiped for me, and there's just all these other sorority chicks that are out there that I can go spend my time with. They're like, why would I go play minor league ball when I can do this? And you're telling me Corbin's problem is he's losing guys to go play minor league ball?
No, but right. Everything you said is right, but the key there was fifth round, right? It's kind of like the NFL draft, right? What do we talk about this year? The back half of the draft gets weak now because it's like, nah. But I'm talking about guys who are going to be higher than that. And if
like Andrew Jones' kid.
Yeah, if you're a first or second round pick, you're still going, man. You're still going for that money. So, yes, there's no doubt. You can keep some of those guys who would have in the past been automatic if you can get them paid. And you're right. There's a lot of benefits to staying in and coming out later and all that. But point being. So
you would still say he's a top 10 coach in the game?
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, absolutely. Look, I mean, he's got to prove it. But let's also, remember the program he built, I don't think it just gets wiped away into dust because of all this stuff. You have to win. You have to have more talented teams. They've actually been super active in the portal. They've loaded up. I don't know if it'll be good choices. We'll see. But they have been all over the portal.
So you and Robbie
bats and arms.
You and Robbie are super college baseball heads. Like you guys talk bullpen in May. Like I can't. I watch during the tournament. Like that's I'm not watching regular season baseball, college baseball. But you guys are seam heads when it comes to that. Fair?
I mean, we mostly talk once it's the tournament, but okay.
Okay. You say top 10. Corbin or Vitello?
I'm saying Corbin is top 10. What are you
Corbin
saying?
or Vitello?
Who would I take right now?
Yeah.
Yeah, I take Vitello. But that's
Corbin or Schlossnagel?
oh god, Schlossnagel is so disingenuous. I'll take Corbin. I think.
Oh, Joe, come on! I agree. He's the biggest a-hole, but I think we got to. I mean, Schlossnagel's right now winning a lot more than Corbin.
Yeah, this year he had a much better team than Corbin, and he had some great teams, but with TCU before. But like again, Corbin's not that far removed.
Corbin
look,
or whatever the
next
guy's
year.
name is at Kentucky that's turned them around, Mangione or whatever. Corbin or
I
him?
don't know that. I can't. Oh, I'm Corbin. I'm going to go. He wants to stand
Corbin
in
or
there and
Bakich
fight.
at Clemson right now.
Yeah, I mean, maybe. Okay, I might go Bakich, and he might replace Bakich, or I mean, he might replace Corbin too. By the way, I don't know if they
Corbin
can get him or not.
Or is it O'Sullivan? But he's in the
Corbin
World
wants to
Series,
fight.
and Corbin's getting beat in a regional.
Okay, so let's be the prisoner of every moment again.
3 years, Joe. 3 years
Yep.
since we've been allowed to pay the players, and for 3 years, Vandy's exited in the first round.
Okay, so then doubt him. That's fine, dude. They're doing it, and if he's gonna stand in and fight, I am absolutely not betting against him getting his program back to the
Jared versus Joe, presented by Pella Windows and Doors of Nashville. Ian, go.
Okay, one last on the baseball, since we brought him up. This A&M coach, Schlossnagel, is this the biggest coaching backstab we've ever seen?
Who's going first?
Joe, go ahead.
Ooh, biggest coaching backstab. I mean, like the ones that come to mind. Well, first of all, I mean, Saban, not going to be the coach. Not going to be the Alabama coach. Certainly Bobby Petrino with the Falcons. I mean,
that's an all-timer.
That's a doozy. I think I don't know if I'd say this is the biggest, but it's truly stupid, like that he would say the words he said Monday night, knowing what was coming the next day. First of all, you can't be surprised that it's ass. Second of all, the whole thing is insane to me. So Chris Del Conte is his best friend, right? So what kind of friend?
That's the AD at Texas, by the way.
That's the AD at Texas. What kind of best friend says, hey, I know, right before my buddy plays for the national championship at our rival, let's go ahead and fire the other coach and get this cook in and make this a real problem for everybody. And then he can answer for that tonight too, rather than just shut up for one more day and then just say, boom, here you go, fell swoop, we got our guy. That's just bizarre to me that's how this all went down. I mean, there's no way. I mean, I don't know if it hurt them, but there's a potential for that to be a real distraction for your best friend's team trying to win it all. I realize that school is your rival, but what the hell? But I can't say this is number one overall.
So I'm with Joe. The Bobby Petrino thing, that is in my opinion, the Lifetime Achievement Award of just backstabbing, right? I'll never forget, Petrino signed a contract at Louisville and said, I think he turned down the Raiders or something and said, I'm going to be the coach at Louisville forever. And then he goes to the Falcons, right after he says that. Then he turns around and he leaves the Falcons in the middle of the year to go to Arkansas. Then the way he left Arkansas, that's not really a backstab, but that's embarrassing in and of itself. There's only two others that come to mind at the same level of Schlossnagel. And I think Schlossnagel was the second biggest doofus in all of it, because I thought the way he answered the question, attacking the reporter personally by calling him selfish, I thought was really wrong. Roy Williams was asked right after the championship game under similar circumstances 20 years ago about whether or not he was going to leave Kansas right after they lost the national title to go to North Carolina. I don't know if you remember that, Joe. Bonnie Bernstein was sitting there with him on CBS, and he was like, Bonnie, I know that you got to do your job, and I know somebody said to you in that earpiece that you have to ask that question, but on the human level, I just don't think that now's the time, and I just don't have anything to say about that. And it's well, Roy Williams wasn't really backstabbing Kansas. I mean, he was a Carolina guy, and I think everybody kind of knew Roy was Dean's right-hand man for all those years, that at some point after Bill Guthridge got fired, that no, I mean, they're going to make – well, he wasn't the right-hand man. The right-hand man was the guy who replaced Dean, but then after that guy left, I mean –
Roy Guthridge, but Roy was his number one. Roy was his guy.
I mean, I don't think you could really be mad at Roy for taking that job, given the Carolina history. The only other one I can think of is Tuberville, because Tuberville did this twice. Tuberville – now, Petrino actually did to Tuberville what Tuberville was doing to everybody else. But if you remember, Joe, Tuberville was at Ole Miss, and he said, they're going to have to carry me out in a pine box for me to take the Auburn job. And then he took the Auburn job?
Yeah.
I mean, that's pretty, it wasn't like Schlossnagel said after the game, they're going to have to carry me out of here in a pine box. Although I was so confused when he was like, I left my family to come here. Did his wife divorce him so he could be the A&M coach?
I mean, I assume that means that the family stayed in Fort Worth because they had grown up there and the kids finished school or something like that. But yes, he made it sound like some gigantic hardship or something like this doesn't happen all the time.
Oh, one texter says Lane Kiffin leaving Tennessee. That is up there.
Yeah, but that's up there. But it's a year, and that's the same sort of thing. It's like that was the only job that was going to get him, And so, I mean, and at that point, USC was the Ferrari of jobs in college football. I mean, Pete Carroll had taken it to that level. So,
would you say Brian Kelly leaving LSU to go to leaving Notre Dame to go to LSU was kind of a backstab, given the fact that Notre Dame had always had Brian Kelly's back, even after he got that kid killed? Like, they had his back and paid all that money, and he still ditched him for a bigger check.
Yeah, but he ditched them because I believe that he ditched them because he thought he needed to go to an SEC program to win a national championship. And he was there were times when he was shaky there. I mean, he got real close actually to being fired there. So I don't put that in the same level.
Yeah, biggest backstab. I'm going to have to go with Tuberville. You can't say they have to carry me out of here on a box. You can't say that and then take the next job. I'll go with Tuberville over Schlossnagel, but oof. And, Tuberville, he also might be earning the Lifetime Achievement Award, too. Ian, what's next?
Good candidates. Very good pulls there from you guys. Okay, moving on to some Titans stuff. We played the clip earlier of Titans defensive lineman Jeffrey Simmons on the Rich Eisen show talking about how he talks a lot of trash, and he brought up how he will be talking trash to Caleb Williams about his painted nails. Was that a mistake from Jeffrey Simmons to get out this early about the trash talk for week 1? Jared, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, Chris Sanders was screaming about it today about how it was a bad decision. I think, there's two things here. Number one, if you're going to trash talk Caleb Williams about his painted nails, don't you want to surprise him with that? Like, now when he gets to the line of scrimmage at week 1 and he's like, hey, you paint your nails, ha, ha, ha. Like, Caleb Williams knows it's coming because Jeffrey Simmons told him 2 months ago. So I'm like, I'm not so sure that was a really good idea. But also, I understand trash talking during the game, but I wouldn't be doing any of that trash talking in the media before the game. Like that, I'd be, a little weary of. Simmons doesn't get a ton of media attention for a lot of different reasons, his position, the team he plays for, things like that. I'm not saying it's going to hurt the Titans, but, I'd say even the trash talk should be part of the game plan, right? If it's a big deal to him, hey, that's part of the game plan. Keep that to yourself. Don't go on Rich Eisen and start saying you're going to make fun of his painted nails. Now it won't land with an impact. That's like saying we're going to blitz the safety. Well, now they know you're going to blitz the safety. So are you going to be able to sack the quarterback with that? No, I'm against it. Plus, Chris Sanders sold me on it. Bad call on Simmons' part.
I mean, I don't think it's some big deal. Okay,
Agreed.
I know this is my my default on stuff like this, but it's just I don't think this is going to be a factor. But I agree. Like, if you think that's funny, then keep it in your pocket. Like if you think you can rattle him, then if you're going to tell Rich Eisen everything you're going to say, then how are you going to rattle him? Like, I don't think it's going to affect the game at all. But it's chatter in June, and to your point, Jeff does not get a lot of opportunity, so it's fine.
Okay. Ian,
yeah, we got two quick hockey ones.
Okay.
Should the Preds, Barry Trotz was on the show and they talked about a no movement clause for UC Saros. Should that be included in the contract? Joe, go ahead.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think, I guess to me it's like, what's the sliding scale? Like, what does that do for the number? Because that has to be part of the discussion, right? Like, to me, there's got to be some give and take. And so I think that, and it sounds like Trotz made it sound like it's going to be limited in some way, right? It's not going to be a full movement. So I'm fine with that being in the equation if it does help you work on that number, because you've got to scrounge every bit of space you can to try to build this roster around him. If you're going to sign him, you are in a win now window, whether you're good enough to be in one or not.
Yeah, I think that Barry Trotz did kind of show his hand, which is that he's going to give trade protection, but I thought he made it pretty clear he's not giving trade protection all the way. He said that he's earned some trade protection, and that some I think is pretty important, because then it still allows them to develop Askarov and then move him off. I don't think you get a deal done without any trade protection. And if I was Saros, I would be pushing for a full no move. If he gives him a full no move, now we got problems, because now you got to trade Askarov immediately. But if I was Saros, I'd be pushing for it. But it sounded like Barry is not willing to give that. And the way Barry has talked about, the two sides staying in contact and everything else, the more that it makes me feel like they've probably already hammered that out, and it probably is limited trade protection, and I can live with that.
Okay, the other quick one. Shea Weber has made the Hockey Hall of Fame. Is Shea Weber a Hall of Famer? Jared, go ahead first.
No! He is no. And this is actually larger than Shea Weber. Shea Weber was a great Predator. I mean, he was a great Predator. But he's not a Hall of Famer. A Hall of Fame. Sidney Crosby is a Hall of Famer. Alexander Ovechkin is a Hall of Famer.
So the Hall of Famer is only top 10 players of all time?
So
yes,
here's what I believe the Hall of Fame is.
Are Hall of Famers.
This is what I believe about the Hall of Fame. And this is not just hockey. This is all sports. And we're running into this in all sports. If I can say to you, if we're sitting here, we're talking about a player, and I say Ricky Henderson, we'd all say Hall of Famer, right?
Yeah.
Probably, yeah.
Okay, Scott Rowland.
It's close.
No.
Yeah.
No. We're putting too many of these guys in. Edgerrin James does not belong in the NFL, in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Calvin Johnson does. Edgerrin James does not. Dwight Freeney does not. Those guys do not belong in the Hall of Fame. These borderline Hall-ish guys, to me, the Hall of Fame, you got to be a bona fide superstar. You got to be Ken Griffey Jr. You got to be John Smoltz. You got to be that kind of player for me, and Shea Weber wasn't that kind of player. I mean, I'm looking at Matthias Ekholm, who's had a great career, and I'm like, if they won the Cup the other night, we going to put him in the Hall of Fame? I mean, it's ridiculous. And for Shea Weber to go in on the first ballot? What? He's still in the NHL. I mean, it's crazy. I can't believe it. And so my issue's not with Shea Weber, who, again, was a great Predator, was a great player, but it's my issue with this letting everybody into the Hall of Fame when it's like, is the Hall of Fame supposed to be important or is it not? Because if you're going to let everybody in, if you're going to let Scott Rowland in, if you're going to let Edgerrin James in, if you're going to let Tony Kukoc into the Hall of Fame, then no thank you. It doesn't mean anything anymore. And that's how I feel about Weber making the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, well, as Robbie pointed out this morning, and you just completely glossed over, this is not the NHL Hall of Fame.
Everybody wins a gold medal on Team Canada.
No.
They're the best team. Everybody
Jared?
wins a gold medal on Canada.
Yeah, he made the All-Star team in 2010, winning gold. He was their best defenseman. He wore the A and was also their best defenseman in 2014. He was the lead guy in 2 gold medals.
They could have done it without him.
Guy. Okay, they could have won it without him.
Who won it the years before he was doing that? Oh, yeah, Canada.
That's a huge part of his resume, and you cannot just gloss over that, dismiss that. Also, I agree with the idea if you are elite, and you know what, he doesn't have the Norrises, and Preds fans understand that's, it's unfortunate because he should have at least 1 and probably 2. He doesn't have those. But he was a top handful to be safe defenseman for nearly a decade in the league. That is elite. That's elite play. He got to, he got to the Stanley Cup final with Montreal. Obviously, he missed that run here. But when you're that level of player, that level of excellence for that long, plus you throw in the international excellence, you're wrong.
Here's my thing. I covered the Boston Bruins in 2013, and that was a lockout year, so you really only played your own conference, and it was all division games. And I watched, for the first time in my life, this defenseman on the Montreal Canadiens, P.K. Subban, who won the Norris Trophy that year. And every time I watched P.K. Subban play, I thought, holy crap, who is that? Every time I watched him play. I was a Predators fan at the time. I had respect for Shea Weber, but it wasn't anything like what I saw out of P.K. Subban. When they made that trade, I was asleep like Joe was before the beginning of Jared versus Joe. I was asleep and heard on Boston radio that the Predators had traded Weber for Subban. I jumped out of my bed and I shouted, yes, yes, and it was a good trade. I'm sorry. Do people normally feel that way when Hall of Famers get traded? No. And the first ballot, Joe.
Jared, that was in 2016. I mean, Shea Weber's prime was in years
and PK
before
Subban
that.
was better. Shea Weber's prime was like 2011, 2012, and PK Subban was a better player in his prime than Weber was, and they're not going to put PK in the Hall of Fame. Or at least they shouldn't. I mean, hell, they might put everybody in the Hall of Fame. They might put me in the Hall of Fame. I don't know. Ian, who wins this week?
Well, it was a good week. A little bit more agreement than I would like, probably. Both on Vitello and the Vols program, A&M, all that kind of stuff. But I think I'm going to slightly give it to Joe for his Shea Weber. I do think Weber
Homers.
I
knew it was coming on. I knew it was happening.
And for Joe being consistent with his Vols better program.
So. Well, I mean, I say win the title. They won the title. But I knew that homer take was going to do it. Joe, congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. Good job, Ian. Great job judging today.
Okay.
Jared, okay job arguing today. Decent.
Okay.
Average. Okay.
To the Shea Weber take, because I got thoughts. We'll do that next. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game.
You mind if we talk blue liners for a second?
Oh, I'll never shy away from blue liners.
Yes, Shea Weber, one of the most impactful players on the power play in NHL history over the last 25 years. His 106 power play goals, easily the most by a D-man over that stretch. Again, first year eligible, slam dunk. You're a former blue
Yeah,
liner,
most
really.
deserving for sure, because when you look at the position he played a premier position. We're talking about right-handed shot defenseman that played top pairing, that played big minutes, that played a shutdown, that played the top line power play. And you talk about his impact internationally too with Canada. He's the guy that absorbed all the big matchups, and he's a guy that started his career in Nashville, helped establish that organization, that community. Went to one Stanley Cup final. We all know how hard the Stanley Cup is to win, but the career that he played over 1,000 games and all the goals that he scored, well deserved to be nominated.
Am I the only person living on planet Earth? I mean, seriously. Shea Weber, slam dunk Hall of Famer. What? What? Shea Weber was a really good player, right? Like Shea Weber, I think of Shea Weber and Pekka Rinne as kind of the Steve McNair and the Eddie George of the NHL. Or, excuse me, of the Predators. Which was, well, now I kind of think it's Forsberg and Yossi. But I think Forsberg and Yossi have passed Weber. But again, at that point in time, the first era of good players, and it's like, who was better than the other one? And they were always considered really good by the league, but they really weren't considered the best. That's Weber and Rinne. And I loved Shea Weber when he was on the Predators. But he wasn't that good. Again, we're talking Hall of Fame. Hall of Fame. Not the Scott Rowland Fred McGriff Hall of Fame. Not the Edgerrin James Hall of Fame. I mean, to me, like the Hall of Fame, I'm trying to think right now, like, who's in the Hall of Fame in the NHL? Like, Victor Hedman is a Hall of Famer. But you want to know what Victor Hedman's done? He's won the Norris Trophy. He's won the Cup. Like, what are we talking about? Dylan texts into the text line, and he says, I wasn't a real big Preds fan when Shea Weber was in his prime, but I think it's weird that Pekka has a statue outside of Bridgestone. And I'm thinking about Shea Weber's number's not retired yet by the Predators. Shea Weber doesn't have a statue outside of here, but he's a first ballot Hall of Famer? And it's not like Shea Weber did anything when he went to Montreal. What are we talking about? Shea Weber wasn't even the best player on his team in Montreal. He was the best player on his team here. That he was. But like when I think of the Hall of Fame, there were a lot of good players over the years in all these sports that are kind of forgotten, and I hate to say it, but it's reality. And now we're trying to convince ourselves that Omar Vizquel belongs in the Baseball Hall of Fame. And yet Willie's like, oh, Jared's crazy. Abs, oh, Jared's crazy. Joe and Robbie, oh, Jared's crazy. TS and oh, Jared's crazy. I think what it is I think it's a Canadian thing. And I think because he won the gold medals in Canada, everybody just slops that up, and they're like, oh, yes, in Canada, he was a great hockey for the Leafs. So we go, yo. That's what it is. He stood on guard for thee, and he got you 2 gold medals, so you're putting him in the Hall of Fame.
Blame Canada.
But it's ridiculous. I'm a Canadian fan, or fans of Canadians now, so I'm not going to rip on Canada. But it's ridiculous. Ridiculous. Ryan's up next here. Phone line driven by WilsonCountyHunter.com. Ryan, go ahead.
Jared, you're right. Shea Weber does not belong in the Hall of Fame.
Thank you.
You've got guys like Alexander Mokley, who have been waiting years to be in the Hall of Fame, who has 10 times the hardware that Shea Weber has, and he's still not. He gets snubbed every year.
Did he win 2 gold medals for Canada?
No, he actually He won Stanley Cup, something that everyone loves more than a gold medal. Ask Canada about it. But, no, he was a good player. Cool. But he does not belong in the Hall of Fame. Neither does David Poile. Once again, what did Poile win?
I'm going to give you Poile's won the most games. David Poile belongs in the Hall of Fame. Poile's won the most games in the history of the NHL. That means something. He was the head of USA Hockey, which, again, apparently matters a lot because of Shea Weber. Thank you, Ryan. Shea Weber. David Poile, I am not arguing David Poile. He belongs in the Hall of Fame. Put him in. Shea Weber, come on now. By the way, somebody texted in and said, Jared says that Edger James and Dwight Freeney aren't Hall of Famers. Surely his Titans bias didn't blind him there. You never hear me argue for Steve McNair and Eddie George in the Hall of Fame. I am sitting here telling you that a guy on my team, the Predators, does not belong in the Hall of Fame. I am an Atlanta Braves fan. I think it's ridiculous to put Andrew Jones in the Hall of Fame. Fred McGriff, I actually think probably was a Hall of Famer, but he didn't get to 500 home runs. You will not hear me sit there and, campaign for my guy because he's my team or against your guy because it's your team. I think if you belong in the Hall of Fame, you belong in the Hall of Fame. That's how I feel about it. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106 through the game. Stillman and Company here on the program. We're going to give away some tickets, so we'll do that now. Be caller 5 right now at 615-737-1025. You want a pair of tickets to see Sarah McLachlan at Ascend Amphitheater this Saturday night. Good luck on that one. And I got to tell you, I'm all worked up over the Shea Weber thing, but there was a little nugget that came out today. It's crazy. The Stanley Cup ends on Monday. Tuesday, we figure out who's in the Hall of Fame. Wednesday, we have a little bit of a break, and then tomorrow and Friday, we're going to have all the draft stuff. You know, all the trades before the draft are going to be popping up, and then Friday's the draft, and then right after that, Monday's free agency. I kind of like it. But today, the NHL dropped a nugget. I did not even know this was coming. Ian, did you know this was coming?
About the uniforms?
Yeah.
No.
So apparently Adidas is out and Fanatics is in.
No, that's not a good sign with the baseball situation.
Oh, dear God. And I know Fanatics is telling people with all these different quotes about how players have tried these out and how it's the same facility that's made the uniforms before. And I know. But Fanatics screwed up baseball so badly that they do not deserve the benefit of the doubt. So this is going to be a problem for me until Fanatics proves that it is not a problem. Because I don't understand why I have to give Fanatics the benefit of the doubt. And here's the deal with Fanatics. I don't know where Fanatics came from when they started, but to me, Fanatics feels like a company that just has a bunch of money. And so they've decided, okay, we're in. And they haven't really earned the reputation. You know, Nike had to earn the reputation with Air Jordan, and then that kind of exploded. Fanatics, what have they done? Like, Umbro has done more, in my opinion, than Fanatics. That's the first thing. The second thing is this. I do not understand the NBA anymore. And apparently I'm not the only one because the TV ratings keep going down, down, and down. But the New York Knicks traded 5 first-round picks, including 4 unprotected first-round picks, for some random Mikal Bridges, who's a solid player but not a superstar. He's not Jordan or Pippen. And they traded 5 picks, 4 unprotected first-rounders, because he went to college with the other guys on their team. And tonight, somebody is going to draft LeBron's son, not because LeBron's son is any good, because LeBron's son kind of sucks, but they're going to draft him because he's LeBron's son. When did we stop trying to win in basketball? That's it for us. We're out of here. Stillman and Company. The draft's next. We'll see you tomorrow, too.